Well, good evening and welcome to this magnificent May 9th Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. With that same spirit, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And also with that same spirit, I'd like to have Commissioner Kinney do the presentation, opening ceremony. Please rise. Yes. Correct.
Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kinney. It is my understanding that we have an inspiring and very invigorating presentation by Mr. Lass tonight. So, Mr. Lass.
Yes, no presentation, just a quick ceremonial matter. We have a recognition and presentation for our Corona Parks Foundation. And on, as a partner, as part of the city here, and then as a former District 13 president with the California Parks and Recreation Society. We are pleased to announce that they are the recipient of a Community Champion Award. So the Corona Parks Foundation is a volunteer-led nonprofit that assists with the development, maintenance, and promotion of the parks and recreation programs within the city of Corona. They raise funds for dues, donations, grants, and solicitations to enhance the quality of life by promoting parks and recreation programs for citizens of all ages. Since its establishment in 1993, the Corona Parks Foundation has participated and assisted in the development of a wide variety of projects, including promoting the growth of pickleball, advancing programming with donations in advocacy of senior and adaptive services, and supporting a wide variety of amenities at parks throughout our community. So with that said, please join me in congratulating the winners of the CPRS District 11 Community Champion Award, the Corona Parks Foundation. I would like to ask that our commissioners, several of which are members of the Parks Foundation, join us upstage with those that are in the audience, and we'll present you with an award and photo op.
Thank you, Mr. Lass. That was exciting. Ms. Gutierrez, may I request a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bass? Here. Commissioner Wentworth?
Present.
Commissioner Kenny?
Present.
Vice Chair Olson?
Present.
Chair Munoz?
Present. Fantastic, we're all here. Moving on to meeting minutes. I'm assuming we've all had the opportunity to read through the minutes from the last, through April 11th and April 27th. Do we have a motion to approve the April 11th, 2023 meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
A motion made by Commissioner Wentworth and seconded by Vice Chair Olson. Ms. Gutierrez, will you take a vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
To approve the minutes, you say yes.
Yes. Thank you. Commissioner Wentworth?
Yes.
Vice Chair Olson?
Yes.
Chair Munoz?
Yes.
Commissioner Kenny? Abstain.
Abstain. You weren't here that April 11th?
Yes.
No problem. Minutes for April 27th, which you were there. I may have a motion to approve the April 27th meeting minutes.
I will motion to approve the minutes from April 27th.
I will second.
Okay, that was a motion made by Vice Chair Olson and seconded by whom? Commissioner Bass, thank you. Ms. Gutierrez?
Commissioner Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Wentworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Kenny?
Yes.
Vice Chair Olson?
Yes.
Chair Munoz?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sure after careful review, is there a motion to approve the impact fee balance from March 2023? Developer impact.
It's the consent calendar.
The consent.
Yes.
So it's not in the script, so I'll just say it. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine and have been heard before this commission before. They're routine and non-controversial items, so you can approve the consent calendar as a whole, or any member of this commission can pull an item from the consent calendar for consideration.
I will move to approve the consent calendar.
I second it. Motion made by Commissioner Wentworth and seconded by Chair Munoz. Ms. Gutierrez?
Okay. Commissioner Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Wentworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Kenny?
Yes.
Vice Chair Olson?
Yes.
Chair Munoz?
Yes. Next, this portion of the agenda is intended for general public comment only on items within the Commission's jurisdiction that are not listed on the agenda. Persons wishing to address the Parks and Recreation Commission are requested to identify themselves and state the matter on which they wish to comment. No action will be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Please observe a 3-minute limit for communications. Ms. Gutierrez, are there any speaker cards or comments?
There are no speaker cards or written comments, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now the exciting youth update. Excited about that. Report by our Teen Advisory Council. Oh. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Chair Munoz, we do have a speaker card.
Fantastic.
Okay, Ms. Brenda Doe has a comment.
Come on forward. Thank you.
Good morning or evening. My name is Brenda Dow. I live at 2651 Quail Cove Road in Corona. And I've emailed a couple of you about putting more dog parks in Corona. So I know Michelle and Matt Olson both responded to me. I know we have two, one at Butterfield and one at Griffin Park. But from where I'm at, I live by Santiago High School. I have to drive to both of those. And we have multiple people I know that go to the parks and let their dogs off leash because we don't have enough dog parks in Corona to be able to legally let our dogs off leash without driving to. I've looked at multiple parks and I live close to Chase Park and I would love to see one at Chase Park. That park isn't used for any sports. It does have a playground. It has a large field, but rarely do you see kids playing in the field. It has fence on 3 sides of it. So if you took the back half of that park and just put a fence across it, you'd have one long fence with the entrance. It would be a great dog park there. They already have dog bags. You already have a water fountain. So just block that off and let the dogs run free. I was there Sunday, and there were 7 of us that had our dogs that just wanted to let our dogs run off leash, but it's not allowed to. Another good park would be Jameson, but again, they have sports there, and there's only 2 fences. It's on a busy road of Foothill. So please consider Chase Park for a dog park. It wouldn't be that expensive, and I've even heard people say they'd be willing to help pitch in so that we could get our dogs so they can run free and not have to drive to these Butterfield or Griffin Park. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dell, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Moving on, as for our youth update, do you want to, Teen Advisory Council?
Hi there, hope you guys are having a good Tuesday. I'm Lucas, and I'm the Vice President of the Teen Advisory Council. Around 2 weeks ago, we held our Diversity in Action event on April 29th. We had around 88 participants show up with around 103 if you count TAC members. We handed out around 70 pamphlets, and we had approximately 35 people sign up for the opportunity drawing. We had 9 booths with an event corresponding for each one, and we had plenty of snacks to hand out. If you guys have any suggestions or comments you'd like to give to TAC, we are having a meeting this Thursday, so I can pass it on to any of the TAC members.
Thank you so much. Ms. Gutierrez, are there any speaker cards or comments from the public?
Nor speaker cards or written comments from the public, Chair Munoz.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask my colleagues here if they have any questions, comments, or points of view on Commissioner Bass.
Where was that event at? The Diversity in Action?
It was held in the family room at the Corona Public Library on April 29th.
And what was the objective of the event?
The Diversity in Action event primarily serves to educate the public about different cultures around the world.
Is it multicultural, or was there one featured at that specific one?
It's multicultural. We had 9 countries at this event this year.
Wonderful, thank you.
Commissioner Wentworth?
I just want to say, great job. That sounds like a great improvement. I've seen this event a couple of times, and the teens just do a spectacular job and work really hard at their booths and getting all the other kids involved and doing the games and whatnot that they've brought, and really bringing awareness to the cultural diversity that's out there. It's a really great way to bring kids in and teach them the skills of respect for each other's culture and empathy for each other as human beings, and bring that understanding. So I just want to say, great job. It sounds like you had a really good participation rate.
Commissioner Kinney?
I will second the good job, and thank you for coming tonight.
Vice Chair Olson?
I will third those comments, great comments by Commissioner Wentworth. Thank you for the update, and thank you for coming on, and appreciate everything that you do in the youth community.
As you can see, we're excited about you at least being here to talk to us about what's going on. So may I ask what countries were represented?
We had Malaysia, China, Korea, India, and I believe there was one more. I think it was Mexico. I feel like I'm off on the countries. I unfortunately was unable to attend because I was sick, so I can't exactly remember which ones were there, but if you can get back to me later, I can probably tell you by the next meeting if you still want to know.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And great job. This time, I'd like to turn on to my left and ask for our director's report.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Ann Turner, Director of Community Services. First of all, let me just say that this is a really exciting meeting tonight. In a lot of our meetings, we talk about what we're going to do, or we talk about, future plans. Tonight is really, you're beginning to see all of the things that you've been talking about for the last couple of years coming closer to fruition. So I hope it's an exciting meeting for you tonight. I'd like to remind you that we'll have 4 presentations tonight. So it's going to be a longer meeting. So as folks are presenting, if you have questions and you want to just write those questions down,
so that when we go through the question section, you can just kind of bang through your questions. That would be great. I think we want to just make sure that we're having a targeted and focused meeting tonight, especially as a follow-up to our last special meeting. So welcome tonight. What's happening in Corona? Let's see. The City Council on May 3rd heard 7 items from the Community Services Department. The ones in bold are the ones that fall under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we did get a maintenance and general services agreement for janitorial services. We had the CDBG Home Annual Action Plan. We had lease management, termination of consent assignment to Flight Ventures USA. CDBG is under our community assistance area, as is the lease management at the Corona Airport. Co-sponsorship win, and I have to give great thanks to Jose Correa. He did a beautiful job presenting on co-sponsorship, and the council went ahead and gave the thumbs up for all of the requests of co-sponsorship to be moved forward into the FY24 budget. We had an ordinance amending section 9.22.020 of the Corona Municipal Code relating to alcoholic beverages. That would be moving and allowing permission for alcoholic beverages to be served on the front lawn in front of the HCC facing 6th Street. And we had a couple of other places that we included that. Again, I'd like to remind the public and the commission that alcoholic beverages are not allowed in our parks, any of our parks at any time. But they are allowed here because this summer we're going to have some very exciting special events, and allowing alcoholic beverages to be sold in front of the HCC will be part of that new event lineup. We had a resolution revising the citywide master fee recovery schedule to adjust Kids Club after school recreational fee program. And the council chose to take the differential. So we had looked at the differential between revenues and expenditures. There was a difference that we wanted to pass on in fees to the participants who use the program of $13. We gave the council several options. One was to subsidize the difference. The other was to pass along the $13 all at one time. And the third was to separate that increase over 2 years, and they chose the third, which was to separate the increase, to pass along the fee, but to separate it over a 2-year period. So that was what was chosen. That was brought back to the council from a previous council meeting, and that was what was chosen on May 3rd. And then we talked about the Heritage Room lending policy. So here's the calendar at the library for May. And so when you're thinking about events like DIA and what's happening with our youth activities group, this is where you're going to see a lot of that. We have important bi-weekly event is our Vets Connect Book Club, which is on the 3rd and the 17th of May. This event has gained a lot of popularity recently. We're having more and more people join that book club. All books we have on reserve for the group are always checked out. And here's another reminder that Summer at Your Library, which is the biggest thing the library does all year long, is getting ready to launch. I can't believe we're already talking about summer. I feel like it was just January, but here we go. So make sure that you keep in touch with us to learn all that's going on. We will have a finishing party at the Circle City Center on August 5th, and you are all more than welcome to come. We'll be giving prizes and celebrating those who participated in the program. Already talking about the 4th of July. What? I hope you have all your red, white, and blue. Tuesday, July 4th, we're going to have a Main Street parade, and I do want to assuage all the questions that have been coming to my office about whether Ann and Abby will be continuing to commentate at the first booth at the 4th of July parade. And yes, Miss Abby Linning, resident of Corona, will be volunteering to help commentate at the parade booth on the 4th of July. So we're really excited about that. The applications to participate in the parade are now open and will be open until the June 12th. It's $25. We wanted to lower that fee and lower the barriers for participation, and we hope that more and more folks will find a way to participate. It's really fun to participate in the parade, and the applications are online, and you can follow that web address. I did want to share with the commission that Corona Serves exhibit is going to be at the library. It's from mid-May until June 2nd. We're going to have an exhibit that chronicles all of the major conflicts in the 20th and 21st century. The exhibit is going to be located on the second floor of the library near the Heritage Room. It will be accessible during normal library hours. It is free and no appointment is needed. There will be artifacts, documents, and other pieces of art from our archives on display during this time. We will also have informational panels, and these are really quite beautiful. Our library staff have worked really hard in researching these, and they're lovely. They will be available. Vets Connect has also collaborated with the library on this one, and so they're doing some oral history of veterans, and so that will also be available. The exhibit is a small way to thank our service members, both local and everywhere, for their service and sacrifice. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Last to talk with us about our May events at a glance.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Well, this month we do not have a signature event, but we have 4 co-sponsorship events we are supporting. The first of which is the Cinco de Mayo event, and this is actually its first time back since 2019. Before the pandemic there, and I have to say I am just so moved. Leading up to this event, the stories, the experiences, the history that this event has in the community. I just hear these great stories about the parade, the festivities, the beautiful pageantry, and everything there. And for those that came out, I think you would have been moved too. It was just a really great event. We had about 2,000 folks in attendance, great displays, great activity, and we're really excited to see that committee active again, and we're working hand in hand with them as we plan for the years ahead to keep that tradition alive. Next up, this weekend, we will be having the Relay for Life event returning. So this is the American Cancer Society's 24-hour team event raising money, awareness, and hope in the struggle against this disease. It will take place at Santana Park on Saturday, May 13th, and go through Sunday, May 14th. The opening ceremony begins at 9 a.m. to honor local survivors and caregivers. Luminaria ceremony will be held on Saturday at 9 p.m. to remember those that lost their battle and honored those still fighting. And it's just really powerful to see all those lights there and think about what that means. Also this weekend on Saturday, we will be having the CHIPS Vintage Home Tour with some beautiful displays of our heritage homes here in Corona. And that'll be on Saturday, May 13th from 1 to 4 p.m. There are 4 homes on the tour, and tickets can be bought through Eventbrite. Then last up, coming up at the end of the month, the Corona Chamber Foundation will be hosting their Memorial Mile March, and this is a returning event to honor our military on Saturday, May 27th at 8 a.m. Basically a walk from the chamber to our historic civic center, and then there'll be a really cool flag display that's going to be placed on our lawn to recognize our fallen soldiers, veterans, and current service members. Really neat to see that, and that will actually be on display through Monday, May 29th. All right, we're definitely getting into summer territory here, so I apologize for those that have not accepted it is upon us. But last month we were talking about the Kids Club After School program returning, but when school is out, we do offer our Adventure Camp program. And this is a combined site experience. It actually takes place here at the HCC. And this year we are having a throwback season. So we're taking it old school, think summer camp feelings, campfire sing-alongs, crafts, and bug juice and all that kind of stuff. We have a really amazing, energetic staff, all these really great activities, and a spirit that keeps that kind of summer experience while a day camp alive, right? You never hear I'm bored when you're at the Kids Club and the Adventure Camp programs. And camp does operate Monday through Friday. There's no fee changes this year. It's just $110 for residents, $140 for non-resident. We can accommodate up to 120 participants per week, and we're at about 65% capacity, so there's still time to get involved in that. All right, what's happening at the Circle City Center? Well, a lot of things. Definitely summer is upon us. Our Corona Connection for our summer season went out with all of our wonderful programs and activities and all the services that the city provides. Registration is open, and there's plenty of things, no matter what, age or interest you have. You can take a look at that and find something you might do to keep you engaged or at least air conditioned during the summer. Also, we have been doing a lot of new activities. We're focusing on bringing more free community-based experiences to the site to welcome folks in. In April, we hosted a Plant a Tree in honor of Arbor Day and Earth Day. And that was really kind of taking advantage of that sweet spot with our early childhood classes that are coming in the morning. Our friends at Parks, Facilities, and Trails kind of helped us out. We had some empty tree wells that were definitely in need of restoring as part of our Urban Canopy project. And just invite everyone out for some free fun lawn games. It's great for the parents, great for the little ones, and just to get hands-on, get your hands dirty, and help us plant some trees that they can enjoy when they pass through this facility. All right, and I will round out my update with our volunteer program. So our volunteer team is always working. In the month of April, we had a small but mighty team of volunteers contribute their time towards the beautification of Ridgeline Park and Ridgeline Drive. Their endeavors helped the city add 65 trees, 25 yards of mulch as ground cover, and helped paint our picnic tables and restrooms. Do drive by and check out their impact. It's amazing to see what this Corona Beautiful project does here. And then also in our programs, we had 374 volunteers contributing 2,384 hours of service. So pictured here, you'll see one of our volunteers at the library helping lead story time, but you'll see folks in our Circle City Center, our Senior Center, and throughout the community engaged in all sorts of different opportunities. We have about 1,000 registered volunteers as part of our volunteer program, and the interest just keeps growing. That does conclude my portion, and I'd be happy to pass to Mr. Cortez.
Thank you, Jason. Just have a couple quick updates on fields. So I'm going to talk some turf right now. So about a year ago, we had partnered with ASO at Santana Park to kind of try out a pilot program for us in partnership with them. This is something that aligns with our field maintenance standards. And basically what we did is since they have such heavy use, we took one group of fields. If you're familiar with Santana Park, our lower fields are numbered 1 and 2, our middle fields are 3 and 4, and our upper field, kind of like a pie shape, is field 9. So we went ahead and we agreed to take 3 and 4 out of service for this season, since they were probably the most damaged fields. And we took them out of rotation for about 4 to 5 months is what it'll end up being once we turn them back over. And what we did was we've done aerating on it twice. We added some sand to fill in the undulations, so that way it's not a trip hazard. We've overseeded them, we've top dressed them, we've done broadleaf treatment. We still have one more round of treatment to go on them, and then we'll be able to turn them over to them and essentially have a field that's in extremely playable condition. Plan is next season to take those lower fields and do the same. So we're always constantly rotating them and allowing the fields to have proper rest. We've also been making our rounds to all of our baseball fields. This is something that had unfortunately been neglected and deferred for quite some time. So we have been making our rounds. We've made our rounds to Mountain Gate. We've done some work at Santana, El Cerrito, and we needed to get down to Butterfield. Those ones were in really poor shape. We have 2 more to go, but what we've been doing when we come in is adding about 20 to 25 tons of material per field, realigning all the base pegs, and then removing that arc or the lip that's on the arc. So as you know, where the infield clay meets the ball field, what tends to happen over time as you drag those fields and maintain them on a daily basis, you get a buildup of material on there. And that can actually be a safety concern for the players. If that ball, a grounder pops up and hits somebody in the chin or the face, that can be a safety concern. So we wanted to make sure we were providing safe, playable fields. So we were able to come in and do these to some of our fields. And like I said, we have a couple left out there, but we've been proactively making our rounds to do all the fields and keep us on a continuous rotation. So something we're excited about, really trying to get ahead of that deferred maintenance. And we're just happy to share with you guys what we've been doing. With that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Turner.
Well, I don't know if you saw Facebook and Instagram, but I don't want to take Ms. Martin's thunder, but I will share with you that new park equipment is on the way. It looks like starting this week, we should be beginning to see
new benches, picnic tables, and trash cans in these 13 parks. I do want to make sure that the commission is aware that the standards of the equipment that we're going to be putting in, the new benches, picnic tables, and trash cans, are the items that Ms. Martin brought in front of this commission and that this commission selected. So you'll be beginning to see some of that park furniture standard that you've put into place manifesting itself in the park. So we're really excited about that. Additionally, Ms. Martin's been working on other capital projects in our parks, including the fitness equipment at Lincoln Park. So keep a look around. There's some exciting things starting to manifest inside of our parks. And then finally, I just wanted to share with the commission, this is a lovely picture from the CPRS District 11 Awards, and it was just really a pleasure to have the evening with folks from the Parks Foundation. I think Mr. Lass spoke mostly about all of this, but really what we are able to do in Corona is possible because of the support of our partners. And long before Measure X passed, and long before there was this kind of community energy and investment and support of our parks, the Parks Foundation made it possible for us to have some new playground equipment, particularly at Lincoln Park. And that was a long-term work for them over several years to get that playground equipment in. And it really started the domino that flipped all of what we are doing in our parks, and it really did put the emphasis on inclusive play and inclusive play structures. And I know as Ms. Martin is looking at those structures and getting those designed for our parks and getting those put in our parks, the standard that was set by the playground equipment at Lincoln Park really has set the standard for the rest of the equipment that we've been putting in our parks. And I just want to thank the Parks Foundation. For many years, we just couldn't do the things we wanted to do in Parks and Recreation, and if it hadn't been for the support of the Parks Foundation, a lot of things would not have happened. And so their generous time, effort, and particularly that drudgery sometimes of fundraising really made it possible for us to have an impact on this community, even in the lean times. And so we want to make sure in the times when we are far less lean to thank them for all that they've done, because they really set the precedent for us. That concludes our report this evening. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Ms. Gutierrez, are there any speaker cards or written comments from the public?
No speaker cards or written comments, Chair Munoz.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Bass, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I wanted to say congratulations again to the Corona Parks Foundation. I wasn't aware of them, and so I'm so thankful that of all the work that they've done in the past and the partner that they've been. I also wanted to mention to Mr. Cortez that a funny story, my husband was literally just at Santana Park last week and was raving about the fields and talking about how amazing they were and how he was like, I don't know what they did over there. And obviously this is what they did. So it seems like it was highly effective and worked. Is that something that we'll be seeing in other fields that have that usage?
Yeah, so that'll align with the field maintenance standards that we had taken to council about a year ago, and we'll be incorporating that with our other leagues as well at our soccer fields and also our baseball fields.
Great, I'm so excited to see that. Thank you.
Commissioner Wentworth?
I just want to say first, thank you to Ms. Martin, because I know that this was a tremendous amount of work on her part and with her staff to pull this together and years by yourself. Yeah, I know. It's been a long road. Back from when we were talking about getting new playground equipment for one park, Lincoln Park, yeah. So thank you for all the hard work, and it's really showed up. It's really nice to see that the deferred maintenance and the items that need replacing can finally get replaced, and that we have that teed off and ready to go. And also, I just want to say to Mr. Cortez, thank you. There's no words to say how impressive it is to finally have an ability to do something to the baseball fields and the soccer fields that lasts more than 2 weeks. So, you know, I hope that you're getting positive feedback from the leagues, and I hope that that continues, and it's great to see the rotation come in and the partnership that you and Dr. Turner and Mr. Lass have been able to work with the leagues to get them to buy in and bring it to a standard it's just wonderful. So I just wanted to thank you guys for that.
Commissioner Kinney?
Thank you all for your contributions to this report. I do have a couple of comments. On the fields, they look outstanding. How much did this year's winter and all the rain that we got help with that? Because I know my personal lawn looks really awesome, even, you know, I'm just curious.
It did help with us with the watering. However, it slowed us. It threw our schedule off because we couldn't get out there to do the aeration and the overseeding. But we got the free water, which saved us a tremendous amount of water. So that was definitely a great benefit. And then on the baseball fields, it just kind of made them super muddy and soft. So it made it a little challenging to get out there and get them graded. But hey, we'll take the free water anytime.
Yeah, okay, for sure. Thank
Yeah.
you. And then my other question has to do with the Circle City Center and the contract classes. I was wondering, approximate how many classes you're offering, and if they're starting as early as next week, what kind of capacity do you see in those classes?
Oh, well, it's hard to put a number on things, but I would say we're offering anywhere from 500 to 100 different unique instructors a season, and some of those instructors operate different types of programs and things. And what we really try to do is, choose things that we think the residents are going to respond to in times that they were more likely to attend. The capacity is really great. I don't think there's any classes that we have really had to put a cap on. There's definitely been some programs where they have definitely overgrown their room, and we have to look at really creative ways to stage them in a different way so they can accommodate more people. But I would say, to our residents watching, if you want to participate in these classes, the best thing to do is sign up early, get your name in there, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and the more notice we have, and the more momentum any of our classes go, it just seems like the more successful they are.
Vice Chair Olson?
Thank you, and yes, thank you everybody for your contributions. Lots and lots of great things happening. Good to see so many things that started so long ago coming to fruition. I've been looking forward to this meeting forever, so this is just the beginning. It's awesome. So the Independence Day entry fee, that's $25 per group. So if there's 25 folks in a group, it's only $1 a piece. Easy. All right, I love it. Corona Beautiful is fantastic. I love that program. I love seeing the trees go into the ground. It's just a gift for the future. Keep it up. The fields, so the middle field is out this year. Next year is the lower field, and then the year after that will be the upper field, and there's several fields in the upper field, right? So would we take that entire field out all at once for all those?
So the upper field, I guess we'll address it when we get to that season. They primarily don't use that field for their competition play or heavy play. So that field always seems to hold up the best. Typically just with our regular seasonal shutdown and work on it, it bounces back really, really quickly. It's those two, the middle set of fields and the lower fields, just based on the way they're oriented. I mean, they're truly set up like a soccer field. The upper one, because it's pie shaped, you can only run so many different directions. But those middle and lower fields are your traditional soccer fields, and you really start to see a lot of heavy wear around the outsides where you got refs running up and down, or around the goals. And just over time, over a full season, you really see that heavy traffic taking a toll on the fields.
The big kids too, right?
Yeah.
A little more aggressive play.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said we're going to be maybe doing a rotation, so we expect in maybe 3 years to take the middle field out again and let it rest again? Is that kind of the plan?
Exactly. Yeah, we'd have it on a preventative maintenance schedule where we would have a schedule for all our baseball fields as well as our soccer fields.
Awesome. And thank you very much to the Corona Parks Foundation and for those on this commission who have participated in that and made all the magic happen by bootstrapping it all these years. I really appreciate that. And super thrilled for the new equipment coming to the parks, and I know it did resonate pretty well on the social medias. People are looking forward to that. So thank you for pulling all that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I had an opportunity to have lunch in Newport at Nature Preserve, sitting by myself in my car, reading the documents that were given to us to read through. And I was just humbled by what's been going on in our community by staff. And planting a tree is for the future, planting the spice of life in the child's mind and body and soul at the soccer fields, which are fantastic, and baseball fields is beautiful. Thank you for that. And if you go, the pictures don't do it justice. You need to go there and really walk around and check out the brick test. There's a lot of work involved with that. And so high five for you on that. Soccer fields, amazing. We'll be hearing great news about that in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. Volunteers, it's amazing how many volunteers we had and their hours, incredible. It takes time to do that, but people make time for their kids. Soccer fields, again, are amazing. Quickly, park equipment. I know that Ms. Martin does a lot of work with the park amenities, so high five for you on that. The exhibits, I can't wait to see the exhibits for veterans. It's always moving for that. Just as important as all that, and more importantly, would be the cancer walk. My mom passed away in cancer in '79, and my grandmother passed before that by cancer also. So it runs on my women's side of the family. So anyway, it's hard. I mean, I start tearing up now when I talk about that stuff, but it's really important to get involved with that and walk a mile in someone's shoes to see what they're going through and hear what they're going through. I was here years ago and happened to see a candle in a bag, and I saw a little boy's face in that, and this is by pure coincidence. I walked up to it and read the information on a little card there, and the lady to my right says, "Do you know that person?" I said, "No, I don't, but I'd like to hear more about them." Because that was her son. So it was amazing to hear her story about her son. He's only like 10 years old, younger. Never experienced life at all until at 10 years old. And so many years that he had the gift. But he gifted me by her story being told through her about her son. So we should be involved with that walk for life. And then the items that you talked about, Mr. Last, about the Cinco de Mayo and the Vintage Home Tour, fantastic events, and the Memorial March. I walked up before carrying a flag, and after a mile, you're just going, oh my God, this is heavy. But it's always fun to do that. Anyway, thank you all for your time. It's precious to me to hear what you're doing. Thank you. With that being said, I'd like to report by Tracy Martin, Project Manager for Auburndale Park Improvements.
Good evening. First of all, just thank you guys for all of your support. Really, this is a different conversation that we've had recently with the park amenities, and all that's possible because of the public, your support, Measure X, all of that comes from you, and it just makes us really happy now to have such a different conversation about what we could do in our parks than we did just several years ago. So thank you for that. Tonight, hopefully, we'll keep this one short so that you guys can get on to bigger business. This is about the Auburndale Park improvements that we're planning. Just to provide you a brief update on our status on the improvements that are going on there, and then present a couple of playground options that we'd like to put out to the public, but we'd like to get your feedback first, make some changes to them as necessary, and then have the public decide which design they'd like to go forward with so that we can continue this process. So this is our timeline that we anticipate. Things are much slower than I would like them to be, unfortunately. We are bureaucracy, but we've done the design so far on Auburndale Park. We're bringing before you tonight some playground options for your input. We'd like to take these out to the public to vote. Then we'll continue to work and develop those 100% construction plans, get it out to bid, and we hope that we can get this awarded this winter so that we can start work next spring on the big improvements at Auburndale Park. This is the design for Auburndale Park. I won't get into too much detail on it, but this really was born out of the Parks Commission and Community Services efforts knocking on doors for the neighbors around this park, which we appreciate. This park started out as a private HOA facility. It very much looks that way and feels that way. Many of the neighbors didn't know that it was a public park that they had access to. So a lot of this design comes from that feedback that you received, and we're really seeking to kind of push some of the, take down the fencing, push those tennis courts in, provide a purpose for the park, provide that circulation with pathways, with exercise equipment, I'll say the pickleball court, the P word, sorry, and some exercise equipment, and then some landscaping areas that will be, hopefully that will promote some wildlife, like some butterflies and hummingbirds and such. And really, that's the impetus for the playground designs that we came forward with. For tonight, we have for your review 2 different designs. Both are kind of garden bug themed. We didn't really give a whole lot of detail to our playground designers aside from that. They're designed for children ages 5 to 12. And we'd like to hear your feedback. Are there enough activities? Are there too much activities? How is the shade? Because we know that's important to the public. Is it adequate? And what's your thoughts on the overall design and appeal? We'd like to hear your feedback. We'll take those changes and get them incorporated and then put it out to the public, because ultimately they're the ones that are using the equipment, and ask them to select which ones they'd like to see. So without further ado, we have option A. And both, just for your knowledge, both are comparable budget-wise. There's not a significant difference between them to where that's a consideration to worry about. This is option A. It's got a very large shade canopy, 20 by 20 shade canopy, and it has 2 different slides, I believe 5 different entry points that all have different methods of climbing up, different activities. They have some musical instruments and little ladybug stepping stones there. This is a different angle. One of the things this also has is some little critters, and I'm not sure if you can see them, but they're kind of coordinated with some of the activity panels so that you can say, oh, go find this, go find that, and you'll be able to find it in the playground structure itself. This is just an overview so you can see how large that shade structure is in regards to the equipment. And this actually lists all of the various equipment pieces that are on the design. I can pause here, and if you'd like, or I can keep going, it's up to you, to get some feedback on what your thoughts are on this particular design.
Any questions or thoughts?
I think I'll compare and contrast when we get through the other option.
Okay, we'll move on to option B. This also features 2 slides. It has, I believe, 8 different entry points, one of which is a tunnel that kind of goes up to the middle of the structure. It's got a 12-foot diameter circular shade structure. It also features some photo stations for taking pictures with the butterflies. It has some musical instruments. It also has a little seating area with some shade, and that is the overall. We haven't gotten your input yet, so I'll wait to thank you. But I can take questions now and answer questions and take your feedback on these 2 options.
All right. Commissioner Bass, any questions, thoughts?
Can I say which one I like better first? Okay. So I definitely love option B, but I think I'm biased because I like the butterflies. I really enjoy that. It seems, is it more shade for the option B?
It's actually less shade for option B than A. It's a 12-foot diameter on B and a 20-foot by 20-foot square on the other one. But that's one of the things that we'd like to get your input on. Is this enough shade? Is the other one too much? That's an adjustment that can be made on the playground equipment if we want to go back to the manufacturer and say, look, we'd like a little more shade on this option.
Does the shade factor impact the life of the equipment, the durability of it?
It definitely does. One of the things that we're striving to do is the equipment that we've put in recently, going back and putting shade structures over them. You know how sun is damaging to our skin, it's damaging to equipment, so we're trying to make sure that we protect them. So yeah, definitely more shade the better. more enjoyable for the kids.
And then you know how at some of the parks, I'm gonna guess that maybe the spacing, the amount of space that's available, how sometimes the section for the youngers will be separate from the older kids.
Correct. Usually the playgrounds are designed for ages 2 to 5, and then there's a separate area for 5 to 12. So that way there's not too much interaction between the two.
So this is focused for the
5 to 12.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
They're
Commissioner Bass.
beautiful. Thank you.
Commissioner Wentworth?
Okay, there's, is there 3 slides on option A and 2 slides on option B?
I believe I had the same amount, but don't.
It's a little hard to see.
So we have 1,
Or is it 2? Is it 2 on each?
2 of those side views. We should have 1 of the overview, and then 1 that lists the equipment.
Do they have an equivalent amount of slides?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I was asking. Just from the images, it's a little bit difficult to see. You know, I really like the coloring and the color schematics on option B, but as a mom of a boy, I like option A better with more shade, and I just like the play equipment better, what you can do on it. I just think there's more activity. I mean, I have a girl too, but she's like, it's like having 2 boys, but like super active. I just like the challenge equipment. I think it fits an upper and lower age better, but I wish it had the same kind of color schematics, but that's okay. But I'm siding towards option A, and also because that's not enough shade on option B, that shade structure. Both actually kind of look inadequate for shade, but I also know that if you were going to adequately shade this area, you'd have to put poles out and you'd have to have something going completely across, and we're not going for that. But option A, to me, I think it's more important to have the shade, so.
You'd like to see more shade on option B.
Yeah.
And then maybe get rid of some of the passive equipment, like the seating area where you're not really doing an activity, you're just kind of sitting there.
Yes.
So maybe putting in a different piece of equipment that has an activity associated with it.
Something like that, yeah. I can see on option A, you've got 3 climbing elements there that look interesting, and it's very cute as well, with the bug theme. I don't have any complaints about that at all. Yeah, I just think the activity level, I don't know, I find those on option B, when you just have the platforms and there's not a lot going on, it's just, I don't know. That's just not my favorite with the kids, and I think it gets misused a lot. So I'm more on the side of whatever is a little bit less for a skateboard and a little bit more for activity, like a climbing, or it just kind of interrupts that platform. So I'm heading towards option A in the design thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kinney?
Thank you for bringing 2 great options to us. My hands down favorite is option B. I wouldn't mind if it were in my front yard. It's kind of cute, but and as much as I love all the trains and race cars and everything, it's nice to see some butterflies too. I do think more shade would be good for that. Even that seating area has a little bit of shade. You could probably just maybe extend that, and that's where they could also go and take a break over there. The trees that you can climb, I think the climbing trees are really cool, and I think that there might also be some opportunities for some native plantings and milkweed and a lot of things that the monarch groups are trying to do. I think that might be really, with some educational signs saying this is where they the caterpillars eat this. This is where the adults get their food, or how I think that would be fun for either one. You could do that, but I think you could kind of hone in a little bit because I know that monarchs are really on the forefront of a lot of people's mind when it comes to conservation efforts right now. But anyways, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Olson?
Thank you for these great options. I think the renderings for B are just prettier, right? They got the trees and the flowers in the background, so I'm going to try not to be biased there. But I do think it is just overall more whimsical. And the shade structure, is it possible to make that diameter bigger?
It is. That's
Okay.
some feedback that we can provide to them, and they can make that a little bit larger.
So that's my kind of my only hang up there is I think shade is really important and increasingly so in our parks. But if that could flare out wider and be a bigger structure and that tilt face south, do all the intelligent things to, to shade as much as possible. I'd like to see some shade. I always love to see shade for the caregivers as well.
Yes.
I think that's important. It helps their stamina to be able to hang out with the kids a little bit longer as well.
There are some trees, good established trees at Auburndale, so it's a little bit different than some of our other parks, but that is definitely a great comment.
Excellent. You can tell I spend a lot of weekends in our parks, and I'm always looking for the shade. Things that I just in general, just for in general guidance for parks, that I've noticed just as a user with my kids. I went up to Mountain Gate not too long ago and took my kids up there, and my kid says, "Where's the swings?" Well, there's no swings up there, and they climbed around for a little bit, and they're like, "Okay." And that's my kids, right? They like to do things that move, right? So whether it's the thing on the spring that rocks back and forth, or a carousel sort of spinning element, or the little spinning cups, or like we have at Santana with the poles that spin, or swings, or seesaws, something kinetic is something that I'd love to see in all of our playgrounds, age appropriate, of course. But I think that just really adds something. Like up at Cresta Verde, they got that really cool kind of cage merry-go-round thing. It's clearly the most popular thing there, and kids play together on it. Kids that didn't know each other, they get together and play on it. So a little bit more collaborative play instead of just the solo play that we see so often. So that's what I like to see in parks. Steps up from low entry to accommodate grandparents as well who may need to chase up after a kid up at the top. Make it easy and accessible to get up there. Even for the little ones too. I know it's designed for 5 to 12, but my 1-year-old's going to be up at the very top, going down the tallest slide. That's just the way she is. So yeah, I think if we could get the shade element larger on B, that would be my preference.
Thank you very much.
For me, I concur with my colleagues and their comments and thoughts. They're all impressive, as always. My only thought about option B, well, I like the colors of all the play pieces, but option B seems to be too busy with the trees. That's my only non-positive point of view. I like the idea of more shade, like Vice Chair spoke about. So that would be it for me, really. It looks too busy for option B. The trees may be kind of cumbersome looking. Before we move on, though, I'd like to ask Ms. Gutierrez if there are any speaker cards or written comments from the public.
No speaker cards or written comments from the public, Chair Munoz.
All right, thank you. So what next, Dr. Turner?
That is it. I think Ms. Martin has the direction that she needs to move forward, and we will move on now to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and we will have MIG, who is here via Zoom. Mr. Cortez, would you like to introduce them?
Yes, let's make sure they're on the line. So yeah, thank you. We have a few presentations and a few updates for you this evening on our master plans, which are exciting, and we are getting closer to delivery. So first up is going to be our Parks and Recreation Master Plan with an update by Genevieve Sarro from MIG. And she will go through the presentation, and afterwards we will be more than happy to answer any questions you guys might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Genevieve. Are you on the line, Genevieve?
I am. Thank you, Moses.
Thank you.
Great. Good evening, and thanks again for having me back tonight to provide an update on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And let's see, do we have the presentation on?
All right, it's up now, Genevieve.
There we go. Great, thanks so much. You can go on to the next slide. I'll just give an overview of the agenda. And thanks again to the commissioners for having me here. I'd like to give you an update of where we are in the process. And then I'd like to dig in a little bit to what we heard from the community and learned from our analysis on the community needs assessment. And then I'd like to provide a preliminary vision framework for the master plan that I'd like to discuss with you and get some feedback, and then discuss some next steps. Next slide. So foundationally, this master plan is really a community-driven process with public engagement and the insights of the community forming the foundation of the plan. So throughout this last summer, fall, and even into the winter, we reached out into the community to understand what the specific needs were. And that helps us to establish an understanding about the state of the current Parks and Recreation system and the needs and the opportunities to address those needs that we should consider. Now, here we are in the spring, and we are in the visions and recommendations phase. We'll be discussing that vision framework tonight with plan development proceeding this summer. Next slide. Tonight, I'd like to spend a little time with you reviewing what we learned through the needs assessment phase. The purpose of conducting a needs assessment is really to ground the plan in that community input that we received and the best practices and the research that we do in this stage to guide the development of that vision and recommendations in a really context-specific way. So to that end, we review and summarize what we heard from the community, both in terms of identified needs and priorities for investment, and we conduct some technical analysis to identify areas of deficiency in the park system and opportunities to meet those gaps. So the community provided some extremely rich feedback through the form of an online and paper survey. It was completed by 1,347 respondents, which was a great turnout. And to reach existing park users, the city crafted signs, these great leafs with QR codes on them. They were manufactured and installed in all the parks so that people in parks could actually react, take the survey in the park, and provide us live feedback. That was accompanied by a push through social media, city newsletters, and at city events to really get out the word about the survey and get as much participation as possible. In addition to the multiple choice that you have through the survey, we received over 1,100 individual written comments and ideas through the survey that really gave us a rich depth of comments and insights into the community. The survey results indicate that the majority of the community is in general satisfied with Corona Parks. 60% are satisfied or very satisfied with Corona's parks. But when we take a slightly different lens, we reanalyze the data looking at the community in 4 quadrants, a more nuanced picture presents itself, with the southern portions of the city reporting significantly higher levels of satisfaction with the parks than the northern portions, with the lowest satisfaction levels located in the northeast quadrant, which we're calling quadrant 2 here. Next slide. These quadrants, if you think about the community in 4 different quadrants, they have fairly different population characteristics as well. So in addition to that satisfaction report, areas in quadrants 1 and 2, the more northern portions of the city, when we analyze for different social characteristics, they are higher density in quadrants 1 and 2. They have higher poverty levels, higher levels of diversity, more rental units, and more youth in those northern areas of the city. Quadrant 3, on the other hand, is the highest income area with less diversity and less youth. But Quadrant 3 actually has the most acres of parkland and the newest parks. Quadrant 4 has similar characteristics economically to Quadrant 3, but it does have less parkland. So when we dig into the improvements identified by survey respondents at the parks in each quadrant, Quadrant 2 stands out with a higher need for more general maintenance, a refresh of facilities, and a desire for more children's play structures. Improvements identified for Quadrant 1 by survey respondents were pretty similar to Quadrant 2, but with a desire for more variety and recreation as a key need as well. Quadrant 3, on the other hand, again, stands out for reporting substantially fewer needs in some of the more basic needs categories, especially with regard to maintenance. Next slide. So again, when we look at it on the numbers basis, significantly higher needs were reported in quadrants 1 and 2 for that basic repair and maintenance, along with better playgrounds as well in quadrants 1 and 2. Next slide. So when we look citywide at the analysis and the summary of what we heard from the community, the overarching top investment priority includes improving existing parks, specifically repairing worn and aging park features and adding a greater variety of features to neighborhood parks. Community members are interested in more trails, sports and play areas, additional shade for seating and play, that was a very common feature, and enhanced park maintenance and cleanliness. Citywide survey respondents were also interested in seeing a greater variety of recreation opportunities, especially including more self-directed and organized recreation activities with a high priority on walking and cycling, new loops and things like that. Folks love the community events and gatherings, and really we saw a desire for continuance and even more of those youth and family activities, opportunities for play, and art and fitness programs. But in general, what we heard, if we had to boil it down, we heard really take care of what we have is a high priority. Second, provide enhanced maintenance, shade, trails, and variety and things to do. And third, provide sports, events, and new parks to enhance the community. Next slide. A common metric that's used to evaluate the distribution of parkland is the distance that residents have to travel to get to the nearest park from their house. Research has shown that having a park within walking distance improves park use and increases potential health benefits. In Corona, 59% of residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park, which is a great feat. It's better than the national average of 55%. But what we really want is that everyone can walk to a park. That is the goal, that's the target, to really enhance the quality of life for everyone around. Next slide. So this map shows each park in Corona and the adjacent neighborhoods that are accessible within a 10-minute walk. The green blobs are the areas within a 10-minute walk surrounding each park. The yellow areas are neighborhoods that are outside of that 10-minute walk shed. There's good news here. Most of the residential areas in the city are within that 10-minute walk of the park. But gaps do exist in some areas. You can see these yellow areas showing here on the map. Some near the 15 and 91. In the central part of the city, there are some small gap areas near Corona and Centennial High Schools. And then along the western and southern boundaries, you can also see more yellow areas adjacent to the Cleveland National Forest. And we'll be exploring ways to meet the park needs within these gap areas. And some of these, we can kind of already see some easy wins, especially in southern Corona with conversion of detention basins that are pretty ready to be converted to parks, and through existing and planned trails and potentially acquired land near the Cleveland National Forest. A lot of those gaps in the southern portion of the community can pretty readily be met. However, just like we saw through the community engagement findings, certain areas of the community have better access to parks and healthy living options than the others. And in addition to the distribution of parks, a variety of other factors are important to consider, not just where everyone is on the map. If you can go to the next slide. Another important consideration is population density. So there are areas of the community that have gaps in access to parks with much higher densities, those in the northern and central part of the community, than in some of the other parts. So areas that are showing more red are the most dense portions of the community. And so when you address a gap in those more dense areas, it is serving more people. You can go to the next slide. So another consideration, those areas with higher population density also are scoring lower in terms of being a healthy place, according to an index that we looked at called the Healthy Places Index. And this index maps data on a variety of different social conditions that drive both health and life expectancy. The Healthy Places Index, it breaks down in a percentile ranking all the census tracts in California, and they divide a score into 4 quartiles, from 0 being the least and 100 being the most advantaged. Indicators used in the index include both local economics, looking at poverty levels and income of people who live there, educational attainment, the social environment, transportation features, access to healthcare, housing features, and the kind of general environmental conditions of that area. So this is an important lens to also use when we look at how the city might prioritize resources for gap areas. Certainly one consideration is whether those gaps have additional park and recreation resources that can readily meet the needs, those easy wins, such as undeveloped parkland that we can readily activate, or nearby parks beyond the city limits that could accommodate some of those needs. But then secondarily is to consider whether those gaps have high community health vulnerability for prioritization. Next slide. Another factor that cities look to answer the question, do we have enough parks, is a factor called level of service. And this measure, it differs from the 10-minute walk analysis because it kind of takes geography out of the equation and just looks at the gross park acreage compared to the local population. So Corona has an existing target of 3 acres for every 1,000 residents. That's from the general plan. And currently, with 389 acres of parks in the community, the city is just below that target at 2.5 acres per 1,000 residents. Again, if we use a different lens and look at this on the quadrant basis, we can see disparities in different parts of the community, with much higher levels of service being achieved in quadrant 3 compared to all 3 other quadrants. To meet the general plan level of service, if you could, just a couple more things on this slide. To meet the general plan level of service of 3.0, we would need an additional 82 acres of parkland for the current population. And this is always a target that keeps changing as population increases. As the population increases with potential anticipated growth as assumed by the general plan, an additional 128 acres would be necessary in 2040 to meet that projected population growth. But the good news here is that the city is well on its way toward meeting this target citywide with recently acquired land near the Cleveland National Forest, which will add 305 more acres, which is nearly doubling the city's current acreage. And that will result in a level of service of 4.4 acres per 1,000 residents. Next slide. The city's existing very old master plan of parks also included levels of service targets for a variety of different sports facilities. A facility level of service represents the number of residents served per each facility. So for example, a soccer field level of service standard of 6,000 indicates that there should be 1 soccer field per 6,000 residents. If the number of existing residents served by one facility is greater than 6,000, then there are fewer facilities per the population than the standard. It's not quite meeting the standards, which is representing a lower level of service. So as part of the engagement, just using soccer as an example, we did hear throughout the engagement process about soccer as a well-loved sport and a need. And the previous master plan must have also heard that as well and set a very high target level of service. So currently, when we compare to other jurisdictions of a similar size, Corona has 54% more soccer fields when compared to other jurisdictions of a similar size. However, we're not meeting our previously identified standard, which was set very high. So in the future, we will be looking at these level of service standards. And we'll also want to consider that demands can really shift, and the need for multi-purpose fields and flexibility will be key to allow for the system to nimbly adapt. Next slide. So in summary, through the engagement and analysis, a few key themes really kind of bubbled up and emerged. One is the need to improve the comfort and function of the city's existing parks. The parks are well loved, and some modifications to those parks to make them comfortable and vital are seen as a key priority. Expanding active recreation with innovative use of existing facilities, providing new recreation options, but really a focus on creative recreation options, also elevated. There is a need for priority park improvements in that northeast quadrant, which parallels the need for us to look at parks and recreation service delivery on an equitable basis throughout the community. And finally, the Parks and Recreation system can be the lens to reflect and showcase Corona's identity and the health and vibrancy of its community. Next slide. So the needs assessment has led us to create a draft vision framework to discuss with you tonight, which we're calling the Corona Standard. And the Corona Standard answers that question: what should all residents have access to? And what the needs assessment concludes is that all residents should have access to high-quality parks, green spaces, and recreation opportunities. To get to that target, we should use the lens of equity to elevate those areas that have historically received less investment or have higher health vulnerability, and sustainability to provide that flexibility for change and ensure the ongoing stewardship of the system. Next slide. So to that end, the vision framework includes 7 key community values and outcomes that the master plan will reflect. And these are kind of the general categories in which recommendations will live in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The first is community collaboration. So this is a tenet of the development of the master plan, but it must remain in the master plan through recommendations as well. We heard just how vital the volunteer stewardship is in the community, and to continue that, foster that, and really encourage that, not just on an ongoing basis, but also to involve the community, just as we are seeing Ms. Martin and the work that she's doing through providing options for the community to weigh in on park-specific enhancements, and making sure that we're bolstering volunteering and partnerships in the most effective and sustainable way. The second is recreation for all. We heard from the community a desire for enhanced recreation options and a need to be mindful of providing opportunities in an equitable way. Maintenance and stewardship. We need to set up a structure where it's easy to succeed, considering those long-term operations, maintenance, and management costs as a fundamental tenet to help us succeed in the long term. Health and wellness. A robust parks and recreation system fosters community health and wellness and active living, and we want that reflected in our park system. Resilient parks through a healthy tree canopy, access to nature, natural features. We make our parks and our whole city more resilient. Culture, history, and heritage, making sure that parks feel welcoming to our community members and reflective of our shared history is important. And finally, financial sustainability. We are actively working to analyze the cost of service and establish a continuum where funds are allocated to support the common good and ensure that our system can have ongoing vitality and continued investment. So just kind of a summary of where we are in the process, checking off what we have done, what we have yet to do, and where we are. All the tasks associated with our phases 1 and 2 are complete. We are in the thick of it with phases 3 and 4 and headed towards our master plan. Next slide. So now we were hoping that the commission could weigh in tonight, especially to provide feedback on the vision framework, the Corona Standard, and the values and outcomes that I just outlined. We'd really like to hear from you. Did we get it right? Did we miss anything? And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have as well. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, Ms. Gutierrez, are there any speaker cards or written comments from the public?
No speaker cards or written comments from the public. Chairman,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Bass, any comments, questions, thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. This was really enjoyable to see this data and this information. I was wondering on the slide what improvements are needed in parks by quadrant. What were you referring to by programs? Was that recreation programs?
That's recreation programs and classes, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the programming, the rich programming of a variety of different recreation and enrichment.
And then for the recreation facilities level of service, could you just explain that one more time for me?
Yeah, that one, it gets a little confusing for sure. If you wouldn't mind going back to that slide. Thank you. So it gets tricky. We have two different standards that we're looking here. The blue that we're looking at, we have set kind of a target for ourselves back in the 90s when the master plan was written of how many soccer fields should we have, how many baseball fields, how many basketball courts, all of these different facilities. We had a target. So the blue shows where we are today against that target. So we have half as many soccer fields as we thought we should, but we have 328% of our target on baseball fields. So we've well exceeded the target for baseball fields. Now the orange bar, that gives us a comparison of how Corona is doing as compared to jurisdictions of a similar size. So if we look at all across the nation, cities with about 150,000 people, Corona has 50% more soccer fields than those similar jurisdictions, and 500% more, so 5 times as many fields, baseball fields. But we have less volleyball courts and swimming pools because we're under 100%. So we're less than the average on the national basis if we look at those. So now this tells us a couple of things. One is that standards that we set for 20 or 30 years do tend to shift. And so there should be a little bit of fluidity in those standards, but they give us a target to look at and to look towards, and also gauging ourselves against national similar sized jurisdictions. And it tells us, what our previous wants and desires or our targets were and how that has changed over time. And
would that lead us to then consider the functionality of facilities? Is that something that would lead that conversation so that it can be for 10, 20, 30 years in service type of thing?
Yeah, I think that there can be some kind of conglomeration of these standards too. So maybe it's looking more at multi-purpose fields rather than an individual sport, but looking at our targets in kind of a more fluid way to get to these eventual standards that we're looking for.
Thank you for going back through that. And then for the Corona standard, I really I love that access to high quality parks, green spaces, and recreation opportunities. I'm guessing that as we continue to build out the parks master plan, to make sure that we're providing those spaces, and then through the work of the Parks and Rec Department to provide those recreation opportunities. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bass. Commissioner Wentworth?
Okay, first, thank you for the presentation, and my general comment would be overall that when we met with you in the beginning and we laid out these priorities, you know, your question back to the commission is, you know, did we miss anything? Did we get it right? And I started with the slide deck. It's a little hard without a written report because, you know, the slides have to have an explanation of what it means. So I couldn't come up with a lot of questions, but what I did start putting together is that, you know, when the commission was meeting and the things that we talked about that were on my checklist that were very important are all in here. So this idea that the city be broken up based on age, traffic, you know, these normal delineations in the city, which we see older versus newer development and how that kind of shakes out for the residents, what kind of access they have. That kind of information is in there. And then the overall, when we set our priorities and we talked about having equitable access and how each area of the city, it was, you know, in the beginning it was difficult because it's like you're thinking about people over here have to drive this far to the soccer fields and people that do this other thing have to drive that far over there. And you guys really met that expectation. So I think that you took that all into consideration, and that's why when you were going through the slides and we were getting to the values and outcomes, I felt like everything that we had discussed and seemed almost in the beginning like so mumble-jumbled and complicated and just a huge, you know, like if I was going to make some kind of a board or something, I'd be writing there all day trying to quantify what it is we were heading towards. And I felt like you guys hit all of the key things, and I don't have anything to add to that, and I'm not seeing anything missing. The only thing that I would like to see a little bit more of, and Commissioner Bass hit on it, this level of service slide, you cannot read this as an individual person, and because we don't get a written report as a commission, to come back to us with something that needs your level of explanation to be able to read the slide and the numbers on here to understand it, I think it needs to be broken down for us. It's a little too complicated. So kind of what I'm saying to you is, when I go back to look at this in 3 months, I'm not going to be able to figure out what it says, because I need more information off of it. So I think that the ideas are there, and I can understand what you're saying. There's a level of service by comparable cities. There's what we offer and how these things compare. But I know. But if I'm going to go back and look at it, I don't want to sit here and go, oh my gosh, 556%. And the way it reads, it almost looks like we're short, and you're saying we're over. And that's why I would like it to be more clear. And I think my thing is like, if I can get the crayons out and I can understand it and you can explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner, then I can go and teach other people what it means. So I'm asking you to bring it down to the kindergarten level, and I probably need 3 slides on this, you know, to help me, because I want to have that reference point. And it's also critical because we're talking about advising the city council on policy decisions in development that will make a difference. So when I look at our more dense parts of the city, you know, like off Main Street, like in the quadrants, and I'm looking at what they're going to build. They're going to put in more apartments. They're looking at condos. And I'm looking at my city council as a resident saying, so why aren't you requiring this developer to set aside a small piece of land for a dog park for the people that live in those apartments and condos that are going to have dogs but don't have clear access to a park where there's a lot of walking trails like Mountain Gate or Santana? They're too far away. We don't have the land to put something like that in there. But then there's no conversation about where the people in the more dense areas can add on recreation and what that would look like for them and how it's more equitable. And so those are the kind of things that I think if you break this slide out for me, it is all kind of related, because it helps me then see if I'm off this commission and it's 5 years from now and they're talking about downtown development, you can bet I'll be at that meeting saying, and where are you going to carve out the park? Where are you going to put it? And that's what this plan is for us to be able to make them recognize that this is important and this level of service in this area of the city doesn't work. And I want to have slides that I can understand and go back to, so.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Wentworth. That's really helpful advice for us. We're going to be going to the council with this presentation, and we definitely wanted your feedback on that. The level of service side, when we gave it to the Leadership Commission, when we did it with the leadership team, we also had a lot of questions on that. So you're really pinpointing where the issues are with that is really helpful for us before we go to council. So I really hope that the commission will look at the presentation that is modified for the city council. We'll publish on Thursday. And hopefully we can work with MIG to go back and modify this deck so that's a much clearer thing. We were presenting it, not MIG, at the leadership, and we were kind of lost. I mean, it was like, well, we're 550% of NRPA, which is kind of good, I guess, and we're not quite, So I think that slide, we can break that down a little bit more so it's a little more digestible.
Okay, that would be really helpful because I'm just gonna say intuitively, and I'm gonna pull out tennis because I'm a tennis player. And it almost looks like we have too many tennis courts. And yet, this Sunday at 9:30, I went to 5 parks and couldn't get on a court. And they're waiting. I finally, down at Kellogg, I was able to get a court. But the court conditions are so bad with the cement completely removed and bubbled up, they're a tripping hazard. It's like when you find an open court, it's because we haven't been able to maintain our courts. And the reason it's open is because it's not really playable. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, I'm excited that we're at the point where we're going to prioritize all our maintenance and that's no longer going to be an issue over time. That's amazing. But that's why I was looking at the level of service and I'm like, I'm not saying build more tennis courts. I'm saying it's like when we look at other studies and you say comparable cities and I say, you need to actually give me the list of comparable cities you used because I will go back and look at that. I'm not sure that, is Rancho Cucamonga comparable? Probably. Is Downey? No. But if they have the same population, you put them in the group and I would say, yeah, but that's an old LA county city. It never had as much parkland. It's never going to high density. I actually get down into that because that's where I come back and say, if I'm going to be successfully advocating for residents in the city, I need to know what we were looking at. So that may be something else. I know that's pretty granular, but.
No, that's really helpful. And additionally, what I would like to say to the commission, which I think is really exciting for our team, is in the last 2.5 years, the projects you're seeing come before you have been supported by the data, right? We intuitively have moved in the place that supports the data. So one of the park projects that we're doing is Auburndale Park, right? It's right in that quadrant. Higher density, more people using it. People didn't even know it was a park. And we're trying to make that really useful and helpful for those residents and accessible, good bathroom facilities, a pool, all of those kinds of things. So I think from a staff perspective, this was a very affirming needs assessment because this was kind of what we intuitively knew. And so to have an outside and objective consultant come and affirm that with the data is really powerful for us. And I think that part of this needs assessment piece is to help you understand when we come back to give you the tools and the toolkit that hasn't been unveiled yet, but to give you the tools and the toolkit to assess and prioritize because you are going to have millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance. You haven't done deferred maintenance for 20 years.
Over 20 years.
So it's going to be millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance. So how do you phase that? How do you do that in a financially responsible manner? And how do you prioritize what goes in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? And so we hope that will provide you with that. But that granular feedback is actually quite helpful for us so we can make some adjustments before we go to City Council.
Okay. So I just want to reiterate again, the process of how we got here is just as important as the final product. And I said it before and I'll say it again, that the fact that the staff went out to such lengths to get feedback and that the analysis came back to us in such a way that I can tell you what residents within what distance of what parks, what they want, that makes a huge difference. I feel very comfortable knowing that I have as adequate as we could get information from our community and what their needs are and moving forward. So I think what we're all after is just a thriving community with ample access to community-designed recreational spaces and natural spaces. That is what is in this plan as we delivered it. So overall, I'm very, very pleased. I just wanted to get a little bit more information through on the other side. So thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Wentworth. Commissioner Kinney?
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. Really quick, like a housekeeping thing. Are we going to get an action item on this eventually, or is this going to just be the way it's been?
So what you're going to get in front of you that you will, you are advisory to the city council. So what will happen to you is you will first see the draft. When the draft is complete, you'll get the first update on the draft. You will give us your feedback on that. That will be incorporated, and then the draft will go to the city council in a study session. They will hear from you. Hopefully you will be at that study session to be able to talk about what your feedback was. Hopefully we will have incorporated all of that feedback and it will mirror everything you want. But there will never be a point at which this commission votes yay or nay on the master plan. The yay or nay and the acceptance of the master plan is solely in the purview of the city council.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I'm glad you also mentioned, I feel kind of going blind. I think there's a lot of really great things, and I'm glad to see that we're updating our plan and it's citywide and it's taking all these things into consideration. But I feel like one of the big things that's missing, and it's on this list, and if you look on the slide that is next steps, it's every other line, or there's several references, is to all the cost recovery and all the costs that are involved. And we haven't really had that kind of discussion. You're mentioning it now that it's all the millions and millions. It's the first time that's actually been brought up. And it's, to me, it's an important part of this discussion as well.
So I'd just say, Commissioner Kinney, for your knowledge, we've had a couple of study sessions specifically that is obviously folded into this master plan. So 110% is the sub-consultant for MIG. This is the overall master plan. The financial sustainability piece is such a critical part that it's its own component of the master plan. And we will be more than happy to provide you with that data and that information once staff has reviewed it and had a chance to meet with 110%. And we will get that to you before it is unveiled in the draft of the master plan.
You good? Okay. Vice Chair Olson?
Thank you. Again, very exciting to see this process moving forward and getting closer to phase 4, which is what we're all waiting for. It's excellent to see the data validating, I have this as a point, you said it, it's great to see the data validating kind of what a lot of feelings were in the community, and it's good to move from a reactive phase where, we just kind of react and follow, complaints to being more proactive and getting ahead of it by reaching out to the community instead of waiting until they reach out to us, which is awesome. So very positive feedback there. I do have a question about the phasing. We're in phase 3 now. Phase 4 is when we implement it. What happens after phase 4? What's kind of the ongoing process to do, ongoing needs analysis, make sure we're still on the right track? What's that audit process look like?
So at this point, we will get a toolkit from the consultant. It'll be part of our standards that will come forward to you in the master plan. And we will have to do an annual evaluation with the Parks and Recreation Commission. So much like the strategic plan that we're consistently reporting back to the City Council, you know, here are our tasks, here are where we are with implementation, all of that piece. It is an expectation of this master plan to keep it a living document that is auditing itself. One, to come back and talk to the commission, as we do regularly and annually, about your budget and where we are with these costs, but also to talk to you about where we are based upon the priorities that have been set forward and where we are on implementation. What you can see is that implementation takes much longer always than I ever estimate. And that's for a whole plethora of reasons, but we will always talk to you about where we are towards that implementation. So you will know where we are in the next reasonable 1 or 2 year budget cycle. You'll know where we are in the phases, and we will talk to you about that, and we'll particularly talk with you about that during budget time so you can see where the capital improvement project prioritization is.
Fantastic. The maps of, you know, where folks are 10-minute walking distance from parks and the population density are pretty fascinating. And we want to get to 100% of population within a 10-minute walk, but what is the realistic expectation of that? And are we only talking about formal parks? Because that's kind of seems to be what we're looking at there, but a lot of those folks in those outlying areas that aren't in a 10-minute walk of parks are in very close proximity to things like trails.
So we are integrating that in. That was some feedback that we got. We had originally done the level of service and based it solely on developed parks, and obviously that told a very different story. And when you look at the level that Corona has built out, it would mean acquiring all of this acreage and that we would be building developed parks in it, and that probably isn't going to happen, right, if you look at actually where Corona is as a city. So when we went back and looked at this level of service, this is that integration piece that we've been talking about. So while you may not be in a 10-minute walk of a developed park, you're within a 2-minute walk of the trailhead for X, X, and X. And as we talk through the plans tonight, and particularly the Trails Master Plan, I think you will see how that level of service shifts when we start considering that access to those trails and that ability. So I think one of the things that is really important for us to talk about with the City Council is this customization for Corona, right? So we can talk about what the national standard is, but we want to meet the standards that we're setting for Corona. It's helpful to understand this comparison with like cities, but the only way you know if you're improving is to compare yourself against yourself. Where were you 2 years ago? Where are you today? And I think that's a much more interesting story for Corona. And I think that Corona, in its unique topography, has some really great opportunities, particularly for open space and undeveloped open space and trails.
Excellent. Overall, I think the values and outcomes are right-minded. I think they check all the most important boxes. Final question in terms of phasing, when do we discuss which amenities go where in terms of, you know, balance throughout the city?
So I think there'll be some recommendations that come forward. What we really want to make sure happens is that you approve the methodology or the toolkit. We can easily provide you, and we had a needs assessment that was brought forward to you in 2019, which was basically a list of this park needs a new playground, this park needs a new water fountain, this park, you know. We want to bring something to you that's a little bit richer. We want to give you a toolkit that says, yes, we know we need 45 water fountains or we need 45 playgrounds. We know that. We're going to accept that. And we know what the process is to get those playgrounds and get those water fountains. Now, using the toolkit, we want to say, we know what the list is. Now we want to say, which one of these becomes, you know, priority 1, priority 2. Let's look at it in the context of what we now understand about our park system, what we now understand about the quadrants, what we now understand about how and who and what to to stay true to that value of access to high quality recreation facilities for every Corona resident, right? We're doing it with that lens.
Okay, so this process isn't going to say we need a pump track here or there or dog parks there.
What we'll say is that we believe in access and equity, and because of that, we've broken the city into 4 quadrants. And while not every amenity can be at every park, what we are going to try to do is within each quadrant that every Corona resident has access within the quadrant that they are in to those kinds of amenities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. That's all exciting. I can't wait to get the toolkit and see how it gets mobilized in our minds. And I think that Meg hit it right on target for the most part. Like I mentioned earlier, I was at lunchtime reading the documentation here. I was thoroughly, again, humbled by the whole visual pleasure I kept reading. But after tonight's presentation, which again was wonderful, basically 7 different things they hit upon was, and it's important to me, is the community participation. You have to have that, and we apparently had that. Being equitable and accessible for parks, that's always important. Being sustainable as stewards of our land, we need to be very clear on that concept. And then also fostering community health and wellness and active lifestyles. And as I get older, that's important to me. And then green infrastructure, we need to see that happen again, not just on the master plan, but also the living experience of our drive through town and out of town. And creating a sense of identity, that's all important to where we are in Corona. And then wise allocation of funds. I'm looking forward to seeing that $1 million price tag for maintenance and things of that sort. Be wonderful. Again, I think my colleagues said it all. So with that, I'd like to close my comments. This time.
You can ask for speaker card, or we already did that.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to City Park Master Plan. Mr. Cortez?
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Yeah, so now we have our next master plan update. That will be on City Park. We just want to provide, again, an additional update on where we are with that and what to expect in the coming months. I am joined by RJM, and again, as Ann has mentioned, and I know we keep hitting it, we just want to really reiterate, all 3 of these master plans have been community-driven. I mean, we have done just a tremendous amount of work with the whole team, doing outreach, doing surveys, media campaigns, and really just trying to make sure that we're hearing everybody and that that's what's driving the end goal. So with that, I am going to turn it over to RJM to get in the presentation. And again, as usual, we'll be available for any questions at the end. Are you guys on the line? Can you hear us?
I'm right here, Moses, yes.
All righty, there we go.
All right.
Just tell me how you like me to fast forward, and I'll advance the slides.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll give you the tone that I remember from my school. It used to be ding, and then it would move forward a slide. But I'll just let you know. Let's go ahead and jump right into it and advance to the next slide, if you would, please. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited back, and this is really an exciting project. As Moses had mentioned, this is really an inclusive process that is the community, its staff, its community leaders like yourselves, but it's also all the other planning teams and all the other planning reports that have been developed, listening to some of those elements that might intersect our plan and how can everything relate together so that as these planning documents come together, there's a synthesis between them. So that way they've all evolved together, they've all learned from each other. And so this project, what I'm here to present today is a little bit of the history, what we've done, where we are, and have a dialogue. Discuss some of the open narrative elements that we've come up with to explore those intersections in the planning studies that we've done. So that way we can continue the development of this plan for the community in the future. Next slide, please. Now, the purpose of it is really to create a sense of place, to develop an experience. And when I look at this project and I look at our history, I've really found that this is an intersection of the downtown revitalization plan, trails plans, park and recreation master plans. It's the community experience itself. City Park represents and embodies the entire community, not just one segment, but everybody. It really means to everyone what Corona is and what it can be in the future. And that's what this park represents. So it's to explore that and develop something that the community can be proud of for generations to come. Next slide, please. So when we look at our project timeline, we kicked off with sort of professional analysis. We looked at some background information, previous planning reports, arborist reports. We looked at the site. We went through an opportunities and analysis exhibits. And then we went out and looked at the community. And working with staff, we really listened to the community and received a tremendous amount of responses, which I'll go through here in just a second. But we looked at online surveys, community pop-up events, program workshops, the project website, so we can really hear the community voice. And that's come through as we started to look at the planning components, the relationships of elements. The community voice is woven into the entire fabric of the site and its design components. The last piece is the master plan process, the master plan itself. It's a bubble diagram with preliminary plan design options, and then ultimately some program recommendations as we move forward. Next slide, please. Touching on some of that community voice, working with staff, we received over 2,100 responses. Those responses were identified from immediate vicinity within a mile of the park site, 1 to 2 miles, and then 2 to 3 miles and beyond. We looked at the surveys in several different ways, where they came from, whom was talking about them, what were some of the elements, what were some of the demographic components. So we looked at them in several different lenses. And some of those top community desires that we had heard after several iterations of looking at the outreach elements were walking trails, playgrounds, picnic shelters, gardens, event space, recreation buildings, splash pad, aquatic center, as well as multi-use fields. Next slide, please. Now, early on in the process too, as we are collecting community data, meeting with staff, listening to what the community had shared with us, throughout the entire process, we started to look at the site from a kind of a building standpoint. What is existing in there? Where are the utilities? Where's the electrical line? Where's the gas line? Where are some of the sewer lines, the water lines? We wanted to know what the infrastructure was of the site so we could get a real clear lay of the land. If we were to start to land facilities, where might they need to go based on what was available on the site? Next slide, please. So when we looked at these elements in relationship to the community information that we've been collected, we sat down with staff and with several different markers and highlighters, pens and pencils and dialogue, maps and charts, we started to draw different elements, different relationships, different components, different amoebas on a plan to where we could say, what about this element here? We've heard a lot about this. We need to keep these elements. And we started to really dive into the relationships of the various elements across the land. Keep the existing courts. Look at the relationship off of 6th Street on the south side, the bottom side of the map here. Look at different building components. Look at the existing site elements. What is the history of the site? What is the history of Corona? And how does that relate to it? And how do these things relate to each other? Next slide, please. So we took that information back and we continued to ask ourselves all of those questions. We asked ourselves some of those elements and test the planning relationships between them. And then we went back, came back with staff, met again, talked about more community outreach, and continued to refine the plan yet again, looking at the nuances between the elements, the surrounding vicinity components, the existing facilities that are on site that need to remain, and then how this fabric might ultimately weave together. Next slide, please. And after several iterative processes, things started to take shape. You can see the growth of these ideas merging to visionary plans that had relationships and components. Now this plan is similar, it's another bubble diagram, but this is how plans evolve. And from here, we start to ask ourselves, what ifs? What if we need this? What if we need that? What does an aquatics facility need? What are some of the support components? We start to dive in on these specific elements. What is the parking requirements? Does parking go through the site? Does parking sit around the site? How do you look into the site? Where are the gardens? Where are the elements, the things that the community asks for? And what do they need in terms of support, infrastructure, and the existing site elements that we need to balance, some of these utilities? Next slide, please. So as we started to ask ourselves the what ifs, we went through that process. Sometimes more questions arise. Sometimes we found other elements that started to become a vision, more of an inclusive community fabric that took shape into this plan. Now, a lot of people would say, Zach, this plan looks refined. It's done. It is not done. It's a massing plan. It might look a little more refined than the previous bubble diagram. That's simply because we ask those what ifs. We keep poking the plan. We keep looking at it in a different angle with a different light. and how does it relate? So that way, as we move into the next steps, or as I have presentations like this, I'm able to share some of those what ifs. How much parking do we need to have? Where is parking located? How do things relate across the site? Where's access? We want to be sure that we have at least considered a lot of these elements the community is looking for, community leaders are looking for, and we can have these dialogues. Next slide, please. Now I want to share some of those programming elements that we collected, the aha moments, as the relationships started to come into play and the clarity of the plan started to take a little bit more shape, and we zeroed in on them so we could continue to have a dialogue and a discussion with you, the community leaders. One of the main elements that we heard from was developing aquatics, not just a pool, but a gathering community hub for water play, water learning, adventure water, and even competition. Elements in this aquatic facility include a single-story building with equipment rooms, restrooms, outdoor showers, the components required for pool facilities. We looked at recreational pool elements, a beach entry with dedicated diving areas, an activity pool with a water slide, as well as a lazy river, a spa, and spectator seating with bleachers. Next slide, please. Moving across from the aquatics facility, play continues into a splash pad, as well as a playground. When we looked at these elements too, we started again going back with those community voices of what we heard, hearing elements such as collaborative play. Today I even heard kinetic play. How do people interact with things? One of the terms I like to use is universal play. It's not just accessible, but it's universal. It means it takes into inclusion social and emotional play, playing together, playing as an individual, tactile experiences, but also experiences for mom and dads, grandma and grandpas, as well as children, interacting not just from the perimeter of a playground, but across the entire fabric of the playground so we can experience play together. Next slide, please. As we went through our process, one of my favorite parts was the heart of the park, the community canvas. And this is really Corona, not just today, but tomorrow, as well as the future. The community canvas is who Corona is, through your events, through your elements that you have, the picnics, the Halloween events, the trick-or-treat events. This is the heart of the park where you can have concerts, sporting events, that includes stage elements, a perimeter boardwalk for both large and small gatherings. And I'll note on the boardwalk, which we'll talk about and touch on later on too, but it also includes areas for walking, loop trails, trail connectivity, accessibility across the site, but also smaller events, smaller components where you can have food trucks come in. You can have larger elements with multiple food truck areas across this. But it also includes some components of those founders monuments, the founders fountain there on the bottom right-hand side. These components that mean the history of Corona, but also the future and what Corona is as the community evolves through programming. Next slide, please. On either side of that community canvas are two 20,000 square foot facilities. These buildings are 2 stories tall, and they include rooftop decks, so you can look out over the community canvas and experience a different level of that canvas and looking out across the park. Each of these buildings have courtyards and include versatile programming for different recreation rooms, facilities, or even rental spaces. So that way these facilities, and we tested the parking on these areas as well too, can operate independently or joint as the different programming elements are looked at throughout the site. Next slide, please. As we move across the site on the southeast side, you can see 6th Street running along the bottom. We wanted to make sure to preserve elements that were in the park, so we had no net loss of elements. One of the things that exists in the park today is a skate park. What we looked at in this with the community, with staff, as well as with professional skateboard designers, is having an all-wheel friendly plaza. This is something that is really inclusive of anybody, whether it's on a wheelchair, rollerblade, scooter, bicycles, skateboards, anything that are all-wheel friendly areas can actually help contain. Some of the things we looked at on this one though too, as we started to explore those relationships, is how does it relate to the promenade, the entrance, where it sits along 6th Street, so we can start to play into some of those crime prevention through environmental design components, keeping it open, keeping it visible, not having hidden areas throughout the park, but also making sure we look at containment. How does a pedestrian and a wheeled individual interact along the pedestrian plaza? So we start to look at those components at this level here too, and continue to test the site. Next slide, please. This is probably one of my more uninteresting slides, but this kind of starts to deal with those parking components. As we tested the site, we wanted to know how much parking was necessary. Well, parking is required, and we have to make sure that we balance parking with programmatic events. So that way there is a ease of transportation to and from the site. So that way it doesn't get too crowded with all of these elements in here. Taking the county standards of parking analysis, we started to layer those different elements onto the site. And that's why we came up with this parking configuration and number of stalls. The existing site right now is bisected. So you have a road that runs through the middle of it. None of us want to have our kids run across a road to get from one park to another. The park design layout here represents a complete accessible park from one end to another with connections across the community. So that way, at any point in time, whether you're going to one of the community centers, the splash pad, the aquatics facility, there are adjacent parking facilities for you. Now, this is something that we'll continue to explore and refine as we move on with Corona-specific standards, and we'll start to look at it from a traffic engineering standpoint, as well as from perimeter parking standpoints. Next slide, please. I've always asked myself when creating these presentations, should I put the history at the beginning, or should I preserve the history for an amenity? And with this, with Corona, having the history slide at the very beginning is just a head nod. There's historical references. But where it wants to sit in our presentations and in the park is really as a cultural amenity, the significance of the park. It's so important to know where our roots come from. So that way we can keep focused, not on where we've been, but let it guide where we're going into the future. Using that history, preserving it, working with CHIPS through the process, so that way we can really compare ourselves against ourselves, essentially. Where we are today, where we've been, and where we're going. So that way we can constantly better ourselves. Next slide, please. Again, I always treat this with the historical significance, the trees on site. We always want to be very conscious of environmental sustainability, and the city has a very clear goal of its urban canopy. So when we looked at the site from an existing standpoint, we looked at arborist reports, we looked at all the GIS data of the trees, and we started to identify which trees could be relocated, which trees can be preserved, which trees are in poor health and have been recommended for removal, and how can we replace them so that way we continue to maintain our urban canopy and reduce our heat island effect throughout this process, making sure that we really follow our core values and mission and vision for that reduced heat island effect and promoting the urban canopy. Next slide, please. I know I touched on several components throughout this project, but really the entire foundation of the design team, our experience with staff, as well as the community, is to develop equitable experiences for all in a connected Corona. This is not just a park, but it's the hearts and minds of families within the community and how it's going to reflect on Corona values for the future. I have to say I'm envious of you community leaders who get to see these plans and weigh in and help direct them and make the decision to really change communities to affect the hearts and minds and lives of generations of Corona members to come. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I hope I wasn't too long. I'm here for questions, comments, and even your own what ifs.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your updates and your professionalism and your design. With that, Mrs. Gutierrez, do you have any speaker cards or comments?
No speaker cards or written comments, Chairman.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Bass, any comments, questions?
Yes, I love the update. Thank you. And I do feel really good after the special meeting that we had going into this packet. So thank you for that. I was just thinking, the history slide when we're looking at the stones and the historic site markers. So are those things that are going to be preserved, or are they going to stay right there, or are they going to be moved? What was the point of that one?
They'll be preserved. So they're on site currently. and then they'll be incorporated into the new plan to retain that history.
Gotcha. But it's not on there right now, right? Because that's just a rough version.
Yeah, so right now, they're currently in the park. And like I said, we've kind of just talked about massing. So as we get further into the details of an actual plan, that's where we would figure out where we'd want to incorporate these historic markers.
Okay, and for the existing trees to be removed for site improvements, but then we're going to add new trees? So these are trees that cannot be relocated, right?
Correct. So we worked to see what trees would be impacted. There's some that are not as, I don't say historic, like, for example, peppers or magnolias. Many of the oaks we're trying to retain. A lot of the Canary Island palms we're trying to retain. And we are following the practice of our own adopted urban forest management plan to ensure that, any construction impacts or trees that are going to be impacted by future construction would follow these guidelines.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Wentworth?
Well, thank you for this presentation. I think this is probably the third time I've seen this. And I know you're addressing the parking, but I think that's still at the top of the list of concerns, considering the type of usage we're trying to have here and what we're trying to use it for. So I'm anxious to see kind of the resolution of that. I don't actually at this time have any specific questions, so I will go ahead and pass the baton on to another commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimmy?
Thank you for the presentation. There's still some images and pictures in the presentation, like with the lazy river and all of that, that I wasn't quite sure if that was still something that could be done, or if that's probably been put aside as probably being too much. So I have little questions on that kind of thing. And then back to the trees as well. One thing when you talk to people about the park, that's the one thing that they tell me how much they love is the trees. And I added up to lose 227 mature trees is a big number. I think that's going to be, it's going to be one of those things that you're going to have a lot of pushback, and people see those trees coming down, and you're going to have a lot more people unhappy about it. Then there's also one slide has the community buildings at 20,000, another slide has them at 30,000. I don't know if they're growing in size or if, I'm just kind of confused. But otherwise, I don't have any questions.
The community buildings right now, again, this is a massing plan. I think at one point they were presented at 30,000. At one point they were presented at 20,000. We're just trying to represent those community facility buildings. Particularly, we wanted to do this presentation after the Parks and Recreation Master Plan presentation because we wanted the commission to understand that we do not have purposely built facilities. And so when we talk about particularly recreation opportunities and levels of service for recreation opportunities, we don't have space, and I think Mr. Last did a very nice job of answering that question, talking about the fact that we can offer more and there is more desire in the community than we have necessarily space to accommodate, particularly for our senior program. So if you look at our senior program, that is a one-room repurposed fire station, and you're going to put a nutrition program into that senior program, which we've talked to the commission about, then where do we put all of that senior programming that we want to offer? And so some of this is about also trying to find those right spaces for some of that programming that we can't do anywhere else and we don't have room to do anywhere else.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I've got a few questions and comments. First, on the list of communities' desires, was that a ranked order or was that in no particular order? And I don't have a slide number, unfortunately, but it was slide 5, I think.
Slide 5.
So is walking trails the most common response?
It is.
Okay.
It is a ranked order.
Okay, so that kind of leads into, Commissioner Kinney's question about the buildings and, if we did a thought experiment, if we did have places elsewhere in the city to put things like a proper senior center, would we be using park space for that? Because I'm looking at the list here, and the top thing is walking trails, but I also see a very busy park plan because we're trying to do a lot with that park. Obviously, it's very difficult for me to imagine it at the street level. Maybe it does feel more open, but just looking at the site plan, just kind of as spitballed here, it feels a little busy to me, and it looks like the number one thing people are looking to do is kind of escape busyness and kind of go walk in nature with this park. So I'm not 100% in love with the buildings in the park, but I do understand the calculus and the need and the overall community good. So that's just kind of my feeling there. I don't know if it's not really a question for you, it's just kind of offering some feedback there.
I would just offer that we don't have space elsewhere for these buildings. We want to, and we also want to create, I think, what we're talking about is this heart of this community is create a centralized place in the center of the city that is the gateway to downtown, where it has this innate activity, and it's a very activated park. The walking trails, we will have a circuit around that community canvas, and we will have trails throughout. And there will be this sense of that you can do a circuit. So one of our most busy parks is Lincoln Park. And if you looked at that in a drawing, you would say, well, that's not a trail, that's just like a little loop. But when you actually get down there, you will see that Lincoln Park is used dramatically in the morning particularly, and in the evening after people get back from work, to both walk that loop multiple times to get their steps in, but also to use that fitness equipment. And so we're looking at creating a very similar feel on a much larger scale. But there's also the sense of what we've talked about in the first Trails Master Plan, which is the movement from like a DG granite kind of walking experience into walking on the sidewalk and going through the downtown. If you look at what the lab is doing at the South Mall, you're looking at spaces that flow into each other. So there are building spaces and retail spaces that flow in and out of the park, and so you're driving people all the way through downtown, and a walking experience that will be hopefully when we get into design. I mean, this is just so high level that it's kind of difficult to answer all the questions, because we need to get the designer in there, and we need to get the designer to design in response to programming. But what you're looking at is the opportunity for somebody to have, if they're looking just to exercise, that they can exercise in the park, but then go and get like a Jamba Juice at downtown and come back and do all of that. And we have that cutout that we're going to do on 6th Street, so we'll have a transit cutout there so that the Corona Cruiser and microtransit and other things can come in there. So if somebody wants an absolute outdoor experience, that we're creating more access for people to those gateway trailheads throughout Corona.
I can appreciate that. I might get there. I'm hoping I get there. And I'm sure that some of this comes down to one of my other questions of, what is the long-term plan to kind of prevent some of the types of uses that we find undesirable today, which kind of prevents family uses at City Park? I heard that we're going to have openness, high visibility, and I think we have that today. I mean, you can see straight across City Park, right through the shelters, but they're still there doing things that are preventing family uses. One of my concerns about having more buildings is more nooks and crannies to hide in. You go down to the City Park today, and it's the buildings that really are really taking the beating. Every electrical panel is open, people looking for copper. So kind of what is the long-term plan to kind of prevent the types of uses that we would not like to see in the park going forward?
So I think one of the things is that we're opening the homeless shelter. There's been an incredible investment by the City Council, both of CDBG funds as well as grant funds that Karen Roper has gotten to address homelessness in the city of Corona, both with the HOPE team from the PD as well as CityNet to offer those services. What I can tell you is that an activated park is not attractive to somebody who's unsheltered. They want to come somewhere where they can encamp, rest, and be safe, right? And that's not going to be City Park because there's going to be people moving all around. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. The massing has taken into consideration that any designer who comes for the next phase, so understand that once we go through the master plan that says conceptually this is what we're looking at, we will go out for an RFP for design. So this is not the design of City Park. This is a massing plan to talk about elements that we would like to see in the park. When we go out for the RFP for design, we will do very clear environmental design and landscaping. I mean, Tom can speak to this, he's a landscape architect, but we're very thoughtful about landscaping and providing elements that you do structural design, environmental design, and you make sure that the kind of use that you don't want to see, you don't allow by design, right? And so, again, I think this is so tempting. We talked about this at the special meeting. When we see pictures, we're like, oh, okay, so it's designed, so I'd like to know where the restrooms are going to be. I'd like to know where we are not there. This is just a representation of what elements we'd like to see in the park and where we think they might go. And it is not done, which is why you see the 20,000 square foot, 30,000 square foot. It's still being honed. In fact, just last week, we had a meeting with all of the city departments, planning, fire, all of them, to have them give us some feedback on the massing plan and to help us talk about what we needed to prepare in an RFP for design. So again, as tempting as it is to like nail it down, this is really just that massing plan. It's that idea, it's the concept, it's the vision moving forward.
I appreciate that. There is a YMCA that operates there out of Mobile Structures currently, right next to the pool. What happens to that?
The mobile structures go away, and the YMCA is a great partner of ours, and Mr. Lass has talked very extensively at our special meeting about we will need partners as we start programming in that park. But depending on how programming is used and how those buildings are used, we will engage with the YMCA there, or we may engage with the YMCA more extensively at the Circle City Center, all of those kinds of things, but those portables will go away.
I'm more concerned about the services that they offer, because it's very
We will
used.
work with the YMCA to make sure their services continue to be offered in a reasonable location with appropriate parking.
Excellent. I imagine that alcohol sales will be the one park that maybe have that exception, maybe down the road if things come to fruition. I would support that for community events. Cool. Crest Court is that kind of alley there, right? Kind of fronts the pool today. It is, best description I would have for it is an alley. It's kind of treated like an alley. There's a back gate for a mechanic shop there. Is there a plan to improve that, to make it more park feeling along that stretch?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that ideally, all of us would love to be able to get the parcels that surround that L that comes out where the aquatic center is. So we would love, as the city, to be able to get those other remaining parcels and have the park fully expand from Quarry to 6th. But that alley and the way that alley is used will feel much more inviting. We have had some talks about creating some diagonal parking off of Quarry to be more intentional about, providing parking for the park. So again, this is an update on where we are now. And again, this is not design. This is just massing and sort of amenities that we think should be there and kind of where we think they could be, but we will bring a designer in to do the actual designs.
You showed us the pictures.
I've said I'm sorry about the pictures. I talk to Zach all the time. I'm like, dude, the pictures, man, you're killing me with the pictures. But yes, the pictures at least give you some spatial relation.
I appreciate that. Only two more questions.
Go back to the whole diagramming, sorry.
Sure. Two more questions, and I think it probably relates to that funky property L and the surrounding property owners around the aquatic center. But I would love to see it. We've kind of got that grand promenade, that view into the park from Rimpaw and 6th. I would love to see something similarly welcoming and grand coming from the city center, from Grand and the center of the circle. And I imagine that part of the reason that that's not, kind of low-hanging fruit here is because of the odd property shape. That be accurate. So I would still love to see whatever we can do to create something kind of, magnificent and grand facing the city center and the downtown revitalization efforts that we're doing there to kind of tie it all together. And lastly, I love saving the trees where possible. I'm wondering, for those that need to be removed for, development purposes that are otherwise healthy, is it practical or impractical to possibly move those to other parks?
So we can put it in the design as a bid alternate to see, especially once we get into the weeds of it and we see which trees are going to be impacted. If it's a significant tree and it's worth saving, then we can relocate it either on the property or to another parcel.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Kinney that people love the trees and they hate chainsaws and all that. So
Yep. And
it's not
just
with the orange groves.
Yeah, and real quickly, just to kind of piggyback on what Ann had said about Crest Court, something that we have all discussed as a team is, as we get into this, again, it's all massing, but as we get into the design of it, we have talked about incorporating elements so that in the future, should those parcels ever be available, that, it doesn't look like an afterthought, like, oh, we just plopped in this section over here, so it looks like it flows. Currently, the utilities for those parcels run through Crest Court, so there's the water, sewer, and electric infrastructure there currently. So that's another challenge that we're working through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Olson. A couple things. I know we're looking for time, but as a presenter, I think you might want to start with your history slides first when you present to City Council. Reason why is that two council people, Wes and Speak and Tom Richards, are very into the history of Corona and of this park site. So I would begin there. That way you get to where we've been, then you mosey into where we're at, and then you want to go into where we want to be at your design. So I think that would be a home run if you started that way. That's just my point of view. And then also, I still question the skateboard park. I look at all the documentation we have here, the community voice, top community desires, there's 9 here. I don't see anywhere there's a skateboard park unless you redefine it as multi-use sports field, but that can't happen, I don't think. So I still question that and the size of it too. It's twice the size that you currently have. And then the Lazy River Run size is probably pretty small. You have a slide that comes into that and takes a lot of space for that water slide. As you scoot into that water, it's going to be, I question the size of the Lazy River aspect. And trees, I know several commissioners talked about trees, and I think Tom Richards will be honing in on that aspect of it. And I know we're massing and we're not designing yet, but when I think about trees, these are full-size trees. They're rather old. The roots are all highly impacted already, mainly because they're in grass areas with oak trees. That's not a very good thing. So the roots are basically on the surface of the ground. Is that correct, Mr. Cortez? So then that being said, when you do grading, even though you're massing now, your canopy of the tree you really can't grade within the canopy of that tree without the tree being impacted by that process. So that needs to be thought about at some point in time by the landscape architect and engineers who take on this baton. That's going to be a trick to work out to maintain this quality of design we have here. Good design, though, from a massing point of view. I applaud RGM for doing a great job and also being open-minded to what we're talking about today. Thank you. Next, we want to go into the Trail Master Plan update by Alta.
Alrighty, so this is the last one, I promise. So this is the last update on our master plans, and this is going to be on our Trails Master Plan Phase 2. And I am joined tonight by Tim Bevins from Alta Planning. I'll let him go through the presentation, and as usual, we will be available for questions and comments afterwards. Tim, are you available?
I am. I'm just getting sorted over here on Zoom. One moment, please.
Alrighty.
Tim's been waiting a long time to talk to you, so I think we can spare him a few minutes to get himself together.
Dinner and a show. Dinner and a show. Okay. Are we good to begin?
Yes, you're good to begin. Just let me know as you'd like me to advance the presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your attention, and thanks to the two previous teams as well. I'll do my best not to reiterate or belabor some of the points that they've made, but I do want to underscore, and I think it'll become clear, how much community input and engagement and just discussions have informed this planning effort as well. So a little bit of context and history. Next slide, please. So this plan is building off of a couple previous planning efforts. So in 2019, there was a Trails Master Inventory. This was an effort to just get everything onto some maps, and a whole lot of community engagement informed that, asking folks where they hiked, how they got there, where they wanted to go. Building off the back of that was the 2021 Trails Master Plan Phase 1. This developed a whole lot of trails within the city boundaries, or potential trails, I should say, and concepts and standards. And what we're doing right now in Trails Master Plan 2 is, Phase 2, I should say, is refining and prioritizing the trails that are proposed in Phase 1, and then also informing, as you'll hear in a moment, what we learned from our stakeholders as we got further and further into the Phase 1 trails is that those are all within city limits, but given the city's proximity to the Cleveland National Forest, understandably, there's a whole lot of interest in gaining access to the U.S. Forest Service site. And so as a result, a lot of the focus of Phase 2 expanded to include finding access within or to the Cleveland National Forest. So that looks to access points and entryways and preserving just ways to get into the Cleveland National Forest while talking with the Forest Service. Next slide, please. So the vision of this plan is to provide connectivity to local destinations. So this is where those interior trails start to come in. So we want to close gaps in the trail system, make it easier for people to hike, walk, bike, go for a quick dog walk, whatever it may be, without having to traverse as far as they may need to get to the Cleveland National Forest. In that same breath, though, we want to get connectivity to destinations that are outside the city and improve safety and access to get there. I think that one of the biggest things to highlight here is that bottom line under goals is partner jurisdiction coordination. Given what I just highlighted about the different it's not just the Forest Service, it's also Riverside Parks and flood control. So as we start talking to different agencies, we are finding a path through to get some of these trails built that may not actually be on city limits, but are utilized by your constituents and celebrated by them. Next slide, please. So we began this effort looking at the current state of trails. So looking at those two previous plans, the inventory and Phase 1 master plan, and assessing them, then overlaying that with looking at previous plans or adjacent plans, such as different agencies, looking at like cities, and then what we are getting to, and what we'll ask for your feedback on later tonight, is prioritization of those trails. A lot of tonight's discussion has been about, if the city had more money, or what would be the priorities, and what would be, really exciting to build. And so we're trying to rank these in terms of relative impact or bang for the buck. Next slide. So what you can see here is obviously the city's boundaries, and we have a lot of orange lines that are going outside of the city, and then some of the multicolored lines within city boundaries. These are carried over from the Phase 1 master plan, and then many of the ones going out into the Cleveland National Forest are new. And you'll see, again, we'll present this slide in a little bit, and you'll see that we've created new trails as well to supplement the Phase 1 plan. But the point is that we're looking for a web of multimodal connections. We don't want to concentrate in one area in particular when we want to distribute a larger network throughout the city. And part of what's important to us and really came out in the community discussions is that natural access has diminished. Over time, as the city develops, and particularly along its western edge, and we think about Foothill, for example, easy ways into the Cleveland National Forest have over time become further and further apart. And sometimes when a development comes in, it may block off access. And so as we hear from your constituents, we understand that, well, this is something that's beloved by residents, and now we need to leverage this asset by identifying like existing access points now and maintaining those and finding ways not to have those be developed, working with either private landowners, potential developers, the city itself, and the Forest Service, of course. Next slide, please. This slide is to demonstrate that we did an origin and destination analysis. So this was utilizing Bluetooth data. So anonymized Bluetooth data collected from people's cell phones. Where did they start and where did their trip end? Aggregated, and what you see, the high level takeaway here, and we used Skyline Trail, I should say, as our locus for this analysis, and that the primary pool is coming from within city limits, and then when that would be that red and yellow, and then as we expand outward, you see it still maintains in the relative neighborhood of the city as we go a little bit northeast. Next slide, please. The yellow halo is a 2-mile bike shed, so a 10-15 minute bicycle ride. And the red dot within is a half-mile walk shed, which again is about a 15-minute walk or so, give or take. And as you can see, we are layering on existing trails or access points, I should say, overlaying that with the phase 1 trails that are proposed, which helps us determine need and access and where we might want to, when we're evaluating the phase 1 trails, which ones we think may be the most important to expand this so that to use a clumsy tool, like this entire slide would be yellow and red. We'd be providing access to everybody. If we go to the next slide, I'd like to highlight one of those trails, or 2 of those trails, I should say. So this is the 5th trail. There's about 25 trails presented in the phase 1 plan. And this 5th trail goes from the center of town all the way down to Skyline. And it cuts through a couple different alignments. Some of it is Riverside County Flood Control, who we spoke with. Some of it is city, and I believe most of it is city, and some of it may be in private property, private holding. The intent here, however, is to find a pathway to get to the best spine that we can to get to the hottest asset of Skyline. And working with this linear length, it allows us to find later opportunities to branch off east or west to then further build out a spine, like a trail spine throughout the city. If we go to the next slide, and we look towards another area that seemed a little underrepresented in those access maps that we looked at, and this is kind of in the northeast Butterfield Park Loop. This also was recommended in phase 1, and we had conversations with the Santa Ana River Trail team pulling together all the work within city limits. And we talked about how that alignment's going to work, what the city can do, what this trail might be, what tweaks we might want to do. But overall, the point is that this is a key asset as well for us because it links up to the Santa Ana River Trail, which forms a huge opportunity for the city moving forward. Next slide, please. These are some of the outside jurisdictions that we spoke with. So, these are the types of questions that we spoke with the outside jurisdictions about. I apologize. We spoke with Riverside County Flood Control. We spoke with Riverside County Transportation, Riverside County Parks and Open Space, and of course, the Cleveland National Forest. And part of what we did was aligning data, making sure, this plan, as I described, as the access points get slimmer and slimmer, the opportunities over just the development of the city, what we're trying to do is find the small gaps. And sometimes that means aligning our GIS data or Geographic Information System data with other agencies to make sure that we're looking at the same thing when we're talking about a matter of feet. We also talked to them about what happens with maintenance. If the city has a certain standard and then we get to a jurisdictional crossover, what happens with maintenance on the other side? And particularly with the Forest Service, what was their level of comfort and what was their governing plan? How do they deal, from their perspective, people coming into their property or into the forest on an informal or sometimes called a user-created trail, a use trail? And so we had all those sorts of discussions, and those are captured within the plan as well. We go to the next slide, please. I won't belabor this. A lot of lines inside city limits, but as you can see, a whole lot of key access points highlighted by community members into the Cleveland National Forest. Next slide, please. So we also, within the plan, looked at what types of amenities we may want to have at some particular trailheads, knowing that there's a couple really key ones that go into forest, and also that many of the trailheads proposed in phase 1 and into the Cleveland National Forest are utilizing really small areas, really small city rights of way. So Altadena in particular, some of these images here, is known for a pretty expansive trail system. They also share a border with public land, and many of their access points are small and innocuous in order to strike a balance with the homeowners that live in those cul-de-sacs or whatever they may be. Next slide, please. So this is the Trails Working Group. We've had 6 meetings so far. It's comprised of everyone that uses a trail straight out of Central Caston. We have mountain bikers, hikers, street bikers, trail runners, residents that live nearby, traditional custodians of the land, Native Americans. We're really having a pretty robust discussion with a lot of different perspectives, and there has been meaningful community building within these groups that all have different goals or needs. And I really want to stress and underline how committed they've been. We've been doing evening meetings, 2.5, 3 hours, really getting into the weeds here. People emailing us with ideas and offering to go out and take site photos and sharing their ideas. We built a custom public input map just for the Trails Working Group to draw up some ideas after we heard that they wanted to do that, and they hopped right into it. So it's been really, really helpful for us. And off to the left is some of the comments that the items that we went over those 6 meetings. Next slide, please. To give a little taste of what we explored. So Eagle Road, which is a trail/road maintained by the U.S. Forest Service within the Cleveland National Forest, it's very difficult to access from city property or from the city side of the boundary. And so these next slides, I'm just going to flip through them really quickly. This was created by a Trails Working Group member, so case in point, where they went out, they took site photos, we investigated a couple different options. And what this plan is doing, and again, you'll see this in a couple slides from now, what we're doing though is identifying all these opportunities and challenges, and we're putting them into context for potential implementation and chasing down each of these. What we don't want to do is assume that, and this happens several times over at different trails, we don't want to assume that one option is going to come through. There's a lot of litigation potentially, there's a lot of deal making, money, or there might just be the time to get that into the capital improvements plan and get built. So as a result, we want to provide the pluses and minuses of a couple different access points for many of the trails into the National Forest. Next slide, please. So we can just flip through these quickly just to give a little bit of taste of what we were looking at. These are the different access ways. And then if we go to the next slide, another look at Eagle Road. Okay, great. Thank you, Moses. We can stop at that map. Excellent. Okay, so This is the Phase 1 trails refined and categorized, and then augmented with some small connections and links and alternative entries and exits that we captured from community, community engagement and the Trails Working Group in particular. I'm going to take a sip of water. 1 moment, please. Excuse me. Okay, so this map here, I think it is really important to highlight because it underscores the value of this community process where we're identifying the tiny, the tiny little opportunities or the back of the hand information that someone riding through the city knows really well that wasn't captured because they happened not to be engaged at the trails or the Phase 1 master plan creations. We also spoke with city staff and fleshed this out, looking at landscape maintenance district already under city purview, looking at those as opportunities to provide some connections. So this is what we're working with now as we've refined and built upon Phase 1. Next slide, please. As I described, we are identifying some opportunities into the national forest within the plan, and we're also we're mapping those out. So these slides, this is Bedford Motorway, that again, a big asset within Forest Service land, difficult to get to from the city property, and then we provide a couple different potential access points and what it may take to see that through. Next slide. Similarly, you can see we did this. If you go back to Eagle Road, 1 slide back, Moses. Excellent, thank you. Just another opportunity to highlight how the plan is working, where we're providing opportunities, we're spelling them out, and we're capturing what we heard from the agencies that may be involved here. Next slide is at Fresno. And at Fresno Canyon, one of the things that we want to highlight is connections to the Santa Ana River Trail, both to Orange County, but also the new section that's about to be built through the city. So it's really important for us, getting across Green River, and then also parking along Green River, getting up into that section is really challenging. It's a little bit easier if you park at the top of Fresno Canyon Trail, but then, and we are also looking at what happens with Fresno Canyon Trail when it pops out over at the top at Oak Ridge. There's a couple user-created trails that again traverse some mix of land that's some city, some held private, some in easements, some in the Forest Service, and we're trying to untangle that knot and present options for city consideration. Okay, my last slide. So with all that work and all that said, what we're trying to do now, or what we are doing now, is filtering that through so that the city can develop an implementation plan or identify what to build first and put things into context. So these are our indicators and weighting for our prioritization process. And what we really want to hear from Parks and Recreation Commission is which of these are the most important, or are there other indicators that may be missing to you? Is there something that you think supersedes all, either it's a potential theme or some other component that may be out there, something really fine-grained, the amount, like the view, how great is the view? Do we want that sort of experience, or is it something more about parking? And utilizing those inputs, we'll be able to both have this objective and subjective view of how the trails might be implemented. So the objective is being pushed through a mapping system and this prioritization so as to take our thumbs off the scale. At the same time, as professionals and as informed by your constituents, we also want to suggest what we think are some of the best trails to then consider building in the years to come. So that's where we'll be going with the plan. And with that said, I will stop. I'll thank you for your attention. I'm happy to entertain any questions and look forward to your feedback. So thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation. Ms. Gutierrez, are there any speaker cards or written comments from the public?
No speaker cards or written comments, Chair Munoz.
Thank you. Commissioner Bass?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. So my first thought is definitely parking and safety would be my biggest. If I think about taking my daughter to the trails, I see the area where maybe people walk across if it's not as far or not as close to park there. So I think the task is great. I'm sure that's been put in front of us. But is that something that the accessibility by making it, I don't know if convenient is the right word, but at least safe, that you can drive close enough to get access to these trail entrances? Or is it that because we're talking about private property and all these different jurisdictions, that we're not able to consider that as much?
So parking implications will be something that we'll have to address on a case-by-case basis. But initially, in the Trails Working Group, we were able to come up with, again, we had 25 to 28 trails that came out of the inventory. So we wanted to kind of come up with a phased approach, and we came up with what we kind of coined as our big five. And some of these, again, that we're talking about had some kind of barrier, whether it be a private property issue, or in some cases it might be an easy workaround where it's just partnering with one of our neighboring agencies to figure out a workaround and come up with an agreement. So we do want to make sure that they're safe and that you're able to access them. If you can't access them from maybe right there at the trailhead, is there a landscape district or some kind of city-owned facility that is within reasonable, maybe just a 5-minute walk that you can safely park and get to the trailhead? So those are all the options that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Wentworth?
Okay, I want to thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank the Trails Working Group specifically for all of their input and hard work. There's a lot of interest in the trails, even when I was trying to get this going, and we were having little trail committee meetings just to try to get the city to even do an inventory. And when I talked with the Alta consultant, I brought up certain concerns and different things, and I am super pleased to see that our Trails Working Group went out and took pictures of all the places that I was talking about that I couldn't describe and say, all those access points at Eagle Road I've personally been to, trespassed on one way or another, to get back there and to see for myself what the conditions were. I probably risked my life, apparently, people have told me. But I figure, I'm not there to do any harm, and I'm just going in and out. But it's great to see you catalog the challenges and then be able to work with the different agencies and property owners. And I think that one thing that we need to keep in mind is something like Bedford and Eagle Road. We talk about accessibility. I would also like you to include in this, like Main Street Divide and Eagle Road and Bedford, these are all extremely challenging and difficult trails when you get going on them. This is not something that a lot of people are going to say, I'm going to go do this. Fresno Trail, I don't do Fresno Trail within the city limits. I park in the neighborhood or at the shopping center, walk up Fresno Trail, but I'm not interested in the city part of Fresno Trail. I'm interested in the hike that goes on the fire road that's back there that's going to take me to a really high elevation with a great view of the dam. And in order to get there, I do have to apparently trespass and pass by a county gate and some other things. It's really not clear, but it's clear you're on a fire road and you're not going to get lost. So that being said, it's like, I would like to see some incorporation of difficulty levels, because you're not going to find the same amount of people trying to do that particular trail or Bedford as you would Skyline and that area. It's much more difficult, and I think when we talk about the parking and interfacing with the homeowners and how, I like how Altadena has it, it's not real obvious there's a trail here. Well, I kind of think the same thing with Eagle Road. If we worked out accessibility, it doesn't have to be obvious that there's a big trail there and a bunch of parking. It's a really hard trail. Like, you're not going to see a big population trying to utilize that. And I think that could be valuable feedback. But I am actually very, very pleased with your documentation and the input that the community was able to give you. It's just tremendous. I don't have anything to add other than that suggestion, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wentworth. I just wanted to add to you that we are hopeful that overall from this plan that we'll be able to provide both multimodal opportunities for folks that are just wanting to get some fitness and do kind of circuit trails. I mean, we've talked about circuit trails. Thank you, Vice Chair Olson, for really bringing that out in the Trails Master Plan Phase 1. Those are really within the city limits. As we're looking at these other trails, we hope to have them all rated. That's part of that ultimate goal of having sort of a know before you go and plan your trip to Corona so you understand what you're getting into. We see that effectively done in places like Laguna Beach and other places where you can really understand what you're about to hike into. You can understand from the web before you go, and then obviously it's reiterated once you actually get to the trailhead. So we're thinking of all of those kinds of things so that users are quite clear and we're not asking somebody who's a novice at hiking to go on Eagle Road.
Okay, I can appreciate that. The amount of elevation that you're going to gain at, say, Main Street Divide is tremendous, and the amount of wildlife that you might encounter can be quite dangerous. So it's the kind of thing where, as we're looking at this trail and we talk about safety, to me, it's not something that you should be saying, hey, come here, because it's actually very dangerous. Fresno itself is very dangerous. I've come down on that on my, sliding down on my bottom, you know. And so it's those are the kind of things that, yeah, people worry about, oh, everybody's going to be glomming onto these areas, and it's like, hike it first, and you let me know how you got up there, because you probably wouldn't last very long, and it's certainly difficult to get out of there. So I don't know if we can incorporate that and keep that in mind.
Thank you. Commissioner Kinney.
Thank you for the presentation. I can appreciate the amount of work that goes into this, and having been on trail working groups myself, you could spend hours and hours and hours talking about something and then not get anywhere. So the fact that you've gotten this far is great. I would say that I think that the number one priority, just because we've been working on it for 40 years, is the Santa Ana River Trail. And I mean, it's like, let's just get it done already. And I think that would really, I think that could really be great for the entire community and the surrounding areas, and connectivity to Orange County and up through Norco and Riverside. I think that to me, I think is the most important one. Looking at the maps, I see that you don't have the Butterfield Trail called out specifically, but when I'm looking at some of the trails that were put on the map, I'm looking at them going, that's Butterfield, that's Butterfield, that's Butterfield. There's a lot of pieces that people want to see as little trails that are actually parts of Butterfield. And so I think that if you look at go back and revisit that document, you'll see that was one of our guiding principles on this, is how do we make this trail connect the whole community, and where is it? We didn't want to necessarily have it be a remote, isolated trail. We were looking at connectivity between neighborhoods, and hey, if we do this here, all of a sudden that opens up the trail system. And I think that was a deliberate thing on our part, and that's why we kind of moved it around a little bit, is to work on that. So I think if you go back and look at that document, you'll be able to see that a lot of what you've called out as trails you might want to see are actually part of Butterfield. And I would love it if it was actually called out on the map, because I think that's a really important thing. And I think that as you go through this process and they're identifying what the priorities are, I think it's also okay to cut your losses. There's going to be Bedford, you have a U.S. congressman who's been involved in trying to get access through there recently. I mean, it's going to be a tough one to do. And so I think that you need to be okay with saying, you know what, next round we'll look at that. And because otherwise you're going to get, it can be overwhelming, as you know, and it just, you might lose some really great opportunities when you're honing in on some of really tough challenges. But thank you, it was a great presentation.
Vice Chair.
I would also like to thank you on the great presentation, and I thank the experiences and expertise of my fellow commissioners on the subject, and I defer to them in many ways here. Probably the most important things out of the factors on that final slide is accessibility is number one, and that encapsulates a ton of things, right? A, there being trails nearby, B, having parking, C, just being able to get on them for a broad user base. And the other one would be community support. I think that that's incredibly important. I think it plays into the fact that the Trails Working Group has been such a central part of this process. I think that's fantastic, and my thanks to the participants in the Trails Working Group. It's so great to have the passionate stakeholders guiding our process here, you know, and I think that's a theme through all of the master plans is the community guidance really is going to give them legitimacy in the end. Some questions about, you know, working with the outside jurisdictions. Generally, how's it been going? Is anything at risk of not coming to fruition? I think we can speak to Bedford as probably maybe one of those things. But just in general, how's it been going?
It's been amazing. So I think we all had similar interests. And for some of them, you know, like Riverside County Flood Control, for example, you know, obviously there's work to be done, there's agreements to be done, and then, you know, coming into an agreement. But for the most part, at a very high level, it's been very cooperative, and it actually provides a benefit in some ways. You know, they have some flood control easements that they primarily just use for maintenance of, you know, a few times a year. And aside from that, it's, you know, unfortunately, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and, you know, you might get like homeless encampments there or other things. So they actually, as long as it's done within a safe manner and we can come to agreements, it's actually a benefit for them to have that traffic through there to deter some of that activity. So same thing with the Forest Service. They want to get, you know, they want to have people be able to access the forest, and it's just, okay, how do we come up with a workaround for some of these barriers? So it's been really nice to make these connections and not just make them once, but able to keep the communication going. We've been working on this for several months now. So to be able to meet with them on a regular basis and keep the momentum going has been really nice.
So I imagine that maybe some of the bigger challenges have been with private property owners?
On some of them, it has been some landlock issues. But we've been able to, you know, talk about, as Tim illustrated in some of these, you know, we've come up with some workarounds. You know, it's like, okay, you know, here's a couple options, which one's most feasible and provides the best benefit.
Fantastic. I do agree. The Santa Ana River Trail has been kind of hanging over our head for many, 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 many years. We are the gap in the system, so to speak, and I know it's complicated. We've got the Army Corps of Engineers and the dam and everything else. But I would love to see that as a priority, just for all the reasons that Commissioner Kinney cited. I noticed that one of the trailheads is Chino Hill State Park. I think it's kind of behind the golf course, and I know that a lot of folks, you know, go through the golf course and across railroad tracks, you know, through all the signs that say, do not do this, and then you go 25 feet farther and it says, welcome to Chino Hill State Park, I'm glad you're here, right? So how do we resolve that? Is that something we're looking to kind of formally?
So it is something we actually went on a drive with Riverside County Parks to look at the Santa Ana River Trail, and again, that's one of those phase sections where, you know, unfortunately grade separation is required, and the railroad is not being the most cooperative. I won't say they will not be the most cooperative, but they have some pretty high standards of what they consider for a grade separation. So, you know, they're requiring that it be able to hold, you know, a very, very large piece of equipment, which we understand they want to be able to get, you know, a piece of fire apparatus over the, you know, railroad tracks safely in the event of a fire or an emergency. And there's a lot of CEQA involved, so just, you know, dealing with all the environmental stuff. But yeah, we're aware of those and have been able to meet with Riverside County Open Space about that section of Santa Ana River Trail, because, I mean, we've gone out and driven it ourselves, and yeah, you know, you have to make that sketchy cross across the railroad tracks, and then, yeah, you're all of a sudden driving on the trail, and then you even come across that section where it's paved, you know, just out of the middle of nowhere. So those are all definitely conversations that we want to continue having and kind of build those relationships.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll kind of turn Commissioner Kinney's comment about cutting your losses into a question. I imagine some efforts may remain open past the timeline we've set out for the completion of this plan. So will we just kind of say, okay, we'll revisit those next time, or continue plugging away at those past the completion of this plan? Will we let those forestall the completion of the plan, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think from a overall standpoint, if we get to one of these access points that we want to really try and gain, and we just realize that this is just going to be a much bigger involved project, I don't think we would necessarily want to shelve it. We definitely want to keep this plan active for years to come, because it is going to be our guiding tool for the next 10 to 15 years, not just on trail access, but trail maintenance and, what our standards will be going forward. So I think it would just be something that we'd say, okay, maybe this one's not as low-hanging fruit as we thought. So let's just, maybe not put as much effort into this one and focus on some of the other ones that are more achievable. But I don't think we want to, just shelve it and say, okay, that's never going to happen.
Cool. And I hate to be Johnny-come-lately here, but how do I get another trail in the inventory? Because there is one that exists just off Dominguez Ranch in Green River. It's kind of informally used by the California Department of Forestry now as a fire trail. They go up there and trim the the growth. And it goes way up. Parts of it are pretty steep. Some of them are kind of four limb contact to clamber up. But then once you get up, it goes up a long, long ways.
Okay.
There's all kinds of access that goes quite a ways up. And the property owner there that's the former horse ranch has committed to preserving that access as a trail. So I don't think is it on there?
That's the part of the trail I was telling you that I go on, that I don't use the city part, I go through there.
You go up off Dominguez Ranch?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's you, huh?
That's me and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
You'll find some cars back there that have there's a car,
Oh, no, you're talking up off Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
Up top.
I know there's another trail, but I know what you're talking about. There's another trail back there
Yeah.
as well. And they developed on it, and people were hiking, and it did connect. There's a whole connectivity between that development and the Crown Ranch where they just,
Yeah.
boom, and trail people went, what happened here? We
Right.
can no longer get where we were going. And
Yep.
that's exactly why we're doing this.
Yeah, so is there I guess,
I think did they refer to that as Onion Trail? I can't remember. They had names for all these things, and I can't remember. This is the Trail Working Group knows. They know, because these are the people that introduced me to this stuff.
I think it's low-hanging
I'm sure that
fruit.
they talked about it.
Yeah, I think it's low-hanging fruit, especially since the property owner that's planning to develop there, assuming they can develop there, has committed to maintaining access to it. Right now, you kind of got to traipse over some ice plant and some city maintained property to get there, but it's right there off the curb and easy to get to. So we'll discuss that later, and I think that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Real quickly, press for time here. I'll end on a bright note. I think, Tim, you did a great job on your presentation. The plan is well thought out. I applaud you for coordinating and bringing in the outreach of people that worked with you on the project, and the biking group, I guess it is, hiking group. And I appreciate your honesty about potential issues with legalities and things of that sort. We always, as designers, need to forget those things, but they're out there still. And then I know that you'll be working on parking, and then your last sheet basically on indicators and weighting says it all: implementation, access, equity, safety, user experience, and so forth and so on. And then lastly, and not to be end on a negative note, so I won't, but we talked about it with Dr. Antron about exhibits and the final presentation to the public. How does that get showcased? Is it a booklet, is it a slide presentation, PowerPoint, or?
So again, this will follow the same format as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which means that you'll actually have a book that is a master plan. It will also be available electronically. There will be a presentation that coincides with the master plan. You will see the draft. Then the council will see the draft in a study session, and then it will go for adoption at a subsequent council meeting on a consent calendar.
Fantastic. Great project, great master plan, And great, my colleague said it all. Thank you so much. So one last thing, I guess, would be the commission members' reports and comments. So if Commissioner Bash has anything to add to the meeting, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the presenters today, and the information was polished, professional, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I do not have anything to report or any comments in the interest of time.
All right. Kenny.
Yeah, thank you for everybody that came tonight and to the audience members that came as well. One thing I would like to maybe talk about in the future is to differentiate between a dog park and an off-leash area. I think if we had the concept of off-leash areas, we might be able to open up more space as opposed to having full-fledged dog parks and what comes with that. And I think that that might be what people are actually looking for. I mean, I have a dog and he doesn't need all the fun little stuff. He just wants to run. And so I think that that might be a discussion we could have in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
I just want to thank the staff and the consultants that presented tonight. Excellent information. Really appreciate putting in the time to educate us. I think that's critically important, especially as the council starts considering these items, that we were able to provide some color to those considerations. And I also want to thank Ms. Dow for speaking and hanging out for the entire 3-hour meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that, it's been educational. You've seen how the framework for the parks is being developed and how amenities like dog parks or off-leash areas, new term that I just learned, might fit in. I do support additional areas for dogs within the city. I know both of them, the ones that we have today, are north of the 91. I'd love to see them more accessible in some of the other quadrants as we talked about. So I hope it's been beneficial for you to hang out. So thank you.
Again, thank you, Ms. Dow, and audience for being here tonight. It was great to see an audience. And fantastic. 2 more things real quickly. Thursday, May 11th is the Asian American Pacific Islander Community Conversations event going on in this very room. It's going to be exciting. Based upon the last 2 or 3 we've had in the past, it'll be motivating. And then also we talked about the Vintage Tour, which Mr. Last talked about. And then Saturday, the same day the Vintage Tour, is a Shoot 523 is doing a food sorting event here at Settlement House here across the way there it's really put on by the National Post Office Association, and they're trying to end hunger. So we can all be there and be a part of that program. High five to everybody. With that, are there any announcements? Seeing none, I officially close tonight's meeting at 9:07. Thank you so much.